The wheel cracked like a gunshot in the dying light, and Evelyn Ward knew this was how her story would end. Alone on a blood-red Arizona trail, just like they'd all predicted, 26 years of defying expectations, and fate would claim her in the dust where no one could say, "I told you so," to her face. But then hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. A shadow emerged from the copper sunset, and a voice, low, certain, unflinching, spoke words that would shatter everything. "Ma'am, looks like you could use some help, and I'm not leaving until you're safe." Before we ride into Evelyn's story of survival, love, and redemption, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels across the frontier of the internet. Now, settle in. This is going to be a long night's ride. The Arizona Territory had a way of teaching lessons to those who thought they could master it. Evelyn Ward had learned plenty of those lessons in her 26 years. How to read weather in the color of morning sky, how to shoot straight when rattlesnakes came calling, how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. But the lesson she'd never quite learned was the one her mother had whispered on her deathbed 5 years ago. "Sometimes, Evelyn, a woman's got to bend, or she'll break." Evelyn had chosen breaking over bending every single time. Now, as the splintered wagon wheel lay useless in the red dirt and the sun bled out across the western horizon, she wondered if her mother's ghost was somewhere watching, shaking her head with that mixture of love and exasperation that had defined their relationship. "Well, Mama," Evelyn muttered, kicking the broken wheel with the toe of her worn boot, "I suppose you were right about one thing. Pride does come before a fall." The wheel had given up the ghost 15 miles outside of Redemption Creek, the small town she'd left at dawn with supplies meant to last her journey to her cousin's homestead in New Mexico. The road, if the rutted, treacherous path could be called such, had been murder on the old wagon, but she'd thought she could make it. Thought wrong, apparently. She stared at the disaster before her. The wheel was beyond repair, the axle cracked clean through. Her horse, Bess, a patient mare who'd seen better days, stood in her traces looking as tired as Evelyn felt. The sun was dropping fast, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if they didn't signal the approaching night. Night in the Arizona Territory was when the predators came out. Four-legged and two-legged both. Evelyn's hand drifted to the rifle lying in the wagon bed. She was a decent shot. Her father had made sure of that before he died. But being a decent shot didn't help much when you were alone, exposed, and without shelter. The nearest ranch was at least 5 miles back, and she'd passed it hours ago without stopping, too proud to ask for help from strangers. Pride. There it was again. "You've really done it this time," she said aloud, because talking to herself was better than listening to the silence of the empty desert. Evelyn Ward, the girl too smart for her own good, too stubborn to accept help, The sound of hoofbeats cut through her self-recrimination like a knife. Evelyn's hand was on the rifle before her mind fully registered what she'd heard. She pulled the weapon from the wagon bed, checking the load with practiced efficiency, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. The hoofbeats were coming from the east, from the direction of Redemption Creek. Single rider, moving at a steady pace, not hurried but not cautious either. That could mean anything. A rancher heading home, a drifter looking for work, or worse. 3 weeks ago, a woman traveling alone had been found dead on a trail north of here. The territorial marshal had ruled it robbery, but everyone knew what else had happened before she died. Evelyn had heard the whispers in town, seen the way the women clutched their shawls tighter, and the men cleaned their guns with grim determination. The Wild West was getting less wild with each passing year, or so the newspapers claimed. But civilization moved slow out here, and there were still plenty of places where law was just a word and might made right. Evelyn raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel toward the bend in the trail where the rider would appear. Her hands were steady. She'd learned long ago that showing fear was worse than feeling it. The rider came around the bend on a big roan horse, silhouetted against the dying sun. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't make out details, just the shape of a man in a wide-brimmed hat sitting easy in the saddle. Then he cleared the rise, and the light shifted. He was tall, she could see that much, broad-shouldered. He wore the clothes of a working rancher, dusty trousers, a faded blue shirt, a vest that had seen better days. A gun belt rode low on his hips, but his hands were on the reins, nowhere near the weapon. As he approached, he slowed his horse, raising one hand in a gesture that was universal across the frontier. Peace. "Evening, ma'am," he called out when he was still 30 yards away. His voice was deep, rough-edged like wind over stone. "Looks like you've had some trouble." Evelyn kept the rifle trained on him. "Evening, and yes, I have, but I've got it handled." Even from a distance, she could see his lips quirk in something that might have been amusement. "Begging your pardon, ma'am, but from where I'm sitting, it looks like your wheel's got other ideas about being handled." "I'll manage." "I'm sure you would, given enough time." He was closer now, close enough that she could see his face beneath the hat brim. Mid-30s, she guessed, weathered features that spoke of years under the sun, eyes that were hard to read in the fading light, gray, maybe, or blue, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in a few days. But night's coming on fast, and this isn't a good stretch of trail to be stranded on after dark. "I'm aware of that." "Then you're also aware that you've got two choices. You can stand there holding that rifle on me while we both wait for something worse to come along, or you can accept help from someone who means you none." Evelyn's finger stayed on the trigger. "And why should I trust that you mean me no harm?" "You shouldn't." The blunt honesty surprised her. "You don't know me from Adam. But I know this territory, and I know what happens to people, especially women traveling alone, who get caught out here after dark. So I'm offering you a choice. My ranch is 3 miles back. You can follow me there, get that wheel fixed, and head out in the morning when it's safe. Or you can take your chances here. Some choice. Best I can offer." He shifted in the saddle, and for the first time, Evelyn noticed the weariness in the way he sat. This wasn't a man looking for trouble. This was a man who'd probably had enough trouble in his life already. "Name's Clayton Mercer. I run cattle on a spread about 3 miles east of here. Been in town picking up supplies. Saw your wagon tracks heading out and figured someone ought to check on you before nightfall. Make sure you weren't in difficulty." "Very gallant of you." "Not gallantry, ma'am. Common sense. This is hard country. People need to look out for each other, or none of us survive it." There was something in his voice, not pity, not condescension, just plain truth, that made Evelyn lower the rifle a fraction. She studied him in the dying light, trying to read the measure of the man. Her father used to say you could tell a lot about a person by their eyes and their hands. Clayton Mercer's eyes were steady, patient, waiting for her decision without pushing. His hands were calloused, scarred, working hands, not the soft hands of a card sharp or the twitchy hands of a man who lived by violence. "I don't need charity," she said, hating how defensive she sounded, even as the words left her mouth. "Didn't offer charity. Offered help. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Charity's about feeling good about yourself. Help's about getting the job done." He tilted his head slightly, and the last rays of sun caught his face fully. There were lines around his eyes, creases at the corners of his mouth. A face that had known sorrow, she thought. Known it intimately. "Look, Miss Ward, Evelyn Ward. Miss Ward. I'm not going to sit here and convince you I'm trustworthy. You'll make your own decision about that. But I will tell you that in about 20 minutes, it'll be full dark. In an hour, the temperature will drop 30 degrees. And sometime between now and dawn, something, wolves, coyotes, or worse, will smell your horse and come looking. Now, you seem like a capable woman. You've probably got that rifle loaded and know how to use it. But capable only goes so far when you're outnumbered and outpositioned." Evelyn's jaw tightened. Everything he said was true, and they both knew it. Pride was one thing. Stupidity was another. "If I come to your ranch," she said slowly, "I keep my rifle. I sleep in the barn, not the house. And at first light, you help me fix my wagon, and I'm gone." Something flickered in Clayton Mercer's eyes. Respect, maybe. "Fair terms. Agreed. And if you try anything, you'll shoot me. I understand." He dismounted, moving slow and deliberate, keeping his hands visible. Up close, he was even bigger than she'd thought, easily 6 feet tall with the solid build of a man who worked hard for his living. "Let's get your horse unhitched and your supplies secured. My ranch isn't far, but we need to move before we lose the light entirely." Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could do it herself, but the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive this long, overruled her pride. She lowered the rifle fully and nodded. They worked in silence as the sun completed its descent. Clayton moved with efficient economy, unhitching Bess from the broken wagon and securing Evelyn's belongings to his horse and her own. He didn't talk much, didn't ask questions about where she was going or why she was traveling alone. Evelyn appreciated that. She was tired of explaining herself to people who'd already made up their minds about her. "We'll have to leave the wagon," Clayton said, checking the ropes one final time. "I'll come back tomorrow with tools and proper timber for a new wheel. Might take a day or two to fix it properly. I can't impose on you for that long." Wasn't asking permission. He glanced at her, and in the twilight his eyes were definitely gray, the color of storm clouds. "Like I said, this is hard country. We help each other, or we don't make it." "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." He mounted his horse and offered her a hand up to ride behind him. Evelyn hesitated, then realized she had little choice. Her own horse was laden with supplies, and it was either ride double with Clayton Mercer or walk 3 miles in the dark. She took his hand. His grip was strong, calloused, and surprisingly warm. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength, and Evelyn found herself pressed against his back, her arms instinctively wrapping around his waist to keep her balance. "Hold on," he said simply, and nudged the horse into motion. They rode in silence through the gathering dark. Evelyn tried not to think about how strange this was, sitting behind a man she'd met 15 minutes ago, trusting him with her life based on nothing but instinct and necessity. Tried not to notice the solid warmth of his back against her chest, or the way he rode with the kind of easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. The temperature dropped fast as the last light faded. Evelyn had forgotten how cold the desert could get at night. She found herself pressing closer to Clayton for warmth, and if he noticed, he didn't comment. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, partly because the silence was oppressive, and partly because she wanted to know more about the man she was trusting her life to. "Going on 8 years now." "Cattle?" "Mostly. Some horses. It's not much, but it's mine." You work it alone?" There was a pause, long enough that Evelyn thought he might not answer. Then, "Now I do. Used to have help." The way he said it, flat, closed off, told Evelyn not to push. Everyone out here had a story, and most of those stories had sharp edges that cut when you got too close. "What about you?" Clayton asked after a moment. "Where were you headed when your wheel gave out?" "New Mexico. My cousin has a homestead there. She offered me a place to stay." Running from something or running towards something? The question was too perceptive for comfort. "Does it matter?" "Suppose not. Long as you're not running from the law." "I'm not a criminal, Mr. Mercer." "Didn't think you were. Just making conversation." They rode on through the darkness. The stars were coming out now, millions of them scattered across the black sky like diamonds on velvet. Evelyn had always loved the stars. They were the one constant in a life that had been anything but constant. "There," Clayton said, pointing ahead. "That's home." Evelyn looked past his shoulder and saw lights in the distance, warm yellow squares of lamplight that meant shelter, safety, civilization. As they drew closer, she could make out the shape of buildings. A 2-story ranch house, a barn, a few outbuildings. It wasn't fancy, but it looked solid, well-maintained. The kind of place built by someone who intended to stay. Clayton rode into the yard and dismounted, then helped Evelyn down. Her legs were stiff from riding, and she stumbled slightly as her feet hit the ground. Clayton's hand steadied her elbow. "Thank you," she said, stepping back quickly, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet. Let's get you settled first." He led both horses toward the barn, and Evelyn followed, still clutching her rifle. "Barn's got a loft with clean hay. You'll be comfortable enough there. I'll bring you blankets and something to eat." "I don't want to be any trouble." "Miss Ward, if you were trouble, I wouldn't have offered help." He pushed open the barn doors, and the smell of hay and horses washed over them. "Besides, cooking for 2 isn't much different than cooking for 1, and Lord knows I could use the company." Evelyn wanted to ask what he meant by that, but something in his tone warned her off. Instead, she watched as he began unsaddling the horses with practiced ease. "I can help with that," she offered. "I'm sure you can, but you've had a long day. Go on up to the loft and rest. I'll bring food when I'm done here." "Mr. Mercer." "Clayton," he said, not looking at her. "If you're going to be staying at my place, Even for just a night, we can dispense with formalities. Clayton, then, and I'm Evelyn. Evelyn. The way he said her name, careful, deliberate, made something shift in her chest. That's a good name. Strong. My mother chose it, said I'd need a strong name to match my stubborn streak.
Your mother sounds like she knew you well. She did. Evelyn's throat tightened unexpectedly. She's been gone 5 years now. I'm sorry. Clayton finally looked at her, and there was genuine compassion in those gray eyes. Losing a parent is hard. You speak from experience? Lost both of mine before I was 20, so yes, I speak from experience. They stood there in the lamplight, two strangers bound by shared loss and the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Evelyn felt something in her chest loosen slightly, the constant vigilance she wore like armor, the assumption that everyone she met would judge her and find her wanting. I'll bring food in half an hour, Clayton said, breaking the moment. There's a pump outside if you want to wash up. Water's cold, but it's clean. Cold water sounds perfect. Evelyn climbed the ladder to the loft, her muscles protesting the movement. The loft was exactly as Clayton had described. Clean hay, dim but dry, and surprisingly spacious. There was even a small window that looked out over the darkened landscape. She set her rifle down carefully, then sank into the hay with a sigh. Her whole body ached from the day's trials. She hadn't realized how much tension she'd been carrying until now, when it all came rushing out of her at once. Through the cracks in the floorboards, she could hear Clayton moving below, talking softly to the horses as he cared for them. There was something soothing about the sound, evidence of another human being, proof that she wasn't alone out here in the dark vastness of the territory. Evelyn closed her eyes, just for a moment, just to rest. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Clayton was calling up to her from below. Evelyn? I've got food. She sat up quickly, disoriented. Coming? She climbed down the ladder to find Clayton standing at the base with a tray.
He'd changed clothes, she noticed. Clean shirt, and he'd shaved. Without the scruff, his face was even more striking. Strong jawline, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it didn't smile often, but probably should. I brought stew, he said, handing her the tray. Nothing fancy, but it's hot and filling. There's bread too and coffee. This is very kind of you. Just hospitality, ma'am. Evelyn? He looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. I'll leave you to eat in peace. There's blankets on the tray too. It gets cold at night. Clayton? She stopped him as he turned to go. Why are you doing this? Really? He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, because I know what it's like to be alone when you need help, and I know what it's like when that help doesn't come. He touched the brim of his hat. Good night, Evelyn. Sleep well. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness toward the ranch house. Evelyn stood there holding the tray, watching the lights come on in the house windows, warm and inviting against the cold desert night. She climbed back to the loft and ate the stew, which was surprisingly good, rich and savory with tender chunks of beef and vegetables. The coffee was strong and hot, chasing away the chill that had settled into her bones. As she ate, she found herself thinking about Clayton Mercer and the sadness she'd glimpsed in his eyes. Used to have help, he'd said. Past tense. Something had happened, something that had left him alone on this ranch, cooking for one, living in that big house with only his own company. Evelyn knew about loneliness. She'd been hearing variations of the same verdict since she was 18 years old. Too smart, too stubborn, too independent. You'll die alone, Evelyn Ward. No man wants a woman who thinks she's his equal. Her mother had tried to soften her edges, teach her to hold her tongue and lower her eyes and make herself smaller so men would feel bigger. But Evelyn had never been good at making herself small. She read books, scandalous numbers of books. She had opinions, even more scandalous. She spoke her mind, refused to simper, and generally conducted herself like a human being with thoughts and feelings rather than a decorative object designed to boost some man's ego. The men of her hometown had responded predictably. They'd called her difficult, mannish, unnatural. They'd laughed at her behind her back and made crude jokes about what she needed to fix her. When her father died and left her the house, They'd circled like vultures, offering to take care of things, with the clear expectation that Evelyn would be grateful enough to marry them for the favor. She'd sold the house instead and used the money to buy a wagon and supplies. If she was going to be alone, she'd decided she might as well be alone somewhere new, somewhere without the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on her. Her cousin Rosa in New Mexico had written to her, offering a home on her homestead. "Come west," Rosa had written. "Out here, people judge you by what you can do, not what you are. A woman who can shoot straight and work hard is worth her weight in gold." So Evelyn had packed up her life and headed west, toward the promise of a place where maybe, just maybe, she could be herself without apology. And then her wheel had broken, and Clayton Mercer had appeared like something out of one of the dime novels she used to read as a girl. The strong, silent cowboy riding to the rescue. Except this wasn't a dime novel. This was real life. And in real life, people had reasons for their actions that had nothing to do with romance or heroism. Clayton had helped her because he was a decent man who believed in looking out for strangers. Nothing more, nothing less. Evelyn finished her meal and wrapped herself in the blankets Clayton had provided. They smelled like soap and sun and something indefinably masculine. She tried not to think about that as she settled into the hay, her rifle close at hand. Through the small window, she could see the lights in the ranch house. As she watched, one by one they winked out, until only a single lamp burned in what must be the kitchen. Clayton Mercer, alone in his house. Evelyn Ward, alone in his barn. Two people who'd learned to live with loneliness because the world had decided that's what they deserved. Evelyn pulled the blankets tighter and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd fix her wagon and leave. She'd continue on to New Mexico and her cousin's homestead. This would be nothing but a brief interruption in her journey, a story to tell someday about the time a stranger helped her on a desert trail. But as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the image of Clayton's eyes, storm gray and sad, holding shadows of a pain he'd never speak aloud. And she couldn't shake the feeling that meeting him might mean something more than just a broken wheel and a night in a stranger's barn. Morning came with the sound of a rooster crowing and pale light streaming through the loft window. Evelyn woke slowly, her body protesting the makeshift bed. She sat up, pushing hair out of her face, and looked around the barn in the early light. It was a well-maintained operation, she had to admit. The stalls were clean, the tack organized and properly cared for. This was the barn of a man who took pride in his work, who understood that the details mattered. She climbed down from the loft, stretching out the kinks in her back, and nearly jumped out of her skin when she found Clayton already in the barn, mucking out one of the stalls. "Morning," he said, as if it were perfectly normal to be working before dawn. "Hope I didn't wake you. How long have you been up?" "Hour or so. Cattle don't care much for sleeping in." He leaned on his pitchfork, studying her. "You sleep all right?" "Well enough. Thank you for the blankets." "You're welcome. There's coffee up at the house when you're ready, and breakfast if you're hungry." "I thought I was staying in the barn." "You are. Doesn't mean you can't eat in the house." He returned to his work, making it clear the matter wasn't up for debate. Evelyn washed up at the pump, gasping at the cold water but grateful to scrub away the dust and sweat of yesterday. Then she made her way to the ranch house, her boots crunching on the hard-packed earth of the yard. The house was larger than it had seemed in the dark, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch and real glass windows. Someone had planted flowers once, she noticed. There were beds along the porch, mostly weeds now, but a few hardy roses still struggled along, adding spots of color to the weathered wood. She knocked on the door, feeling oddly nervous. It swung open before she could knock a second time. "It's open," Clayton called from somewhere inside. "Kitchen straight back." Evelyn stepped into the house and stopped. Whatever she'd expected, this wasn't it. The interior was neat, almost obsessively so. Furniture polished, floors swept, everything in its place. But it was also obviously empty in a way that had nothing to do with furniture and everything to do with life. There were no personal touches, no photographs or knickknacks or signs that anyone really lived here. It felt like a stage set, a house performing the idea of home without actually being one. She found the kitchen at the back, a spacious room with a big stove and a table that could easily seat 8. Clayton stood at the stove, flipping eggs in a pan with the practiced ease of a man who'd been cooking for himself for a long time. "Sit," he said without turning around. "Eggs are almost done." Evelyn sat, feeling strange. When was the last time someone had cooked for her? She couldn't remember. Clayton served the eggs with bacon, fresh bread, and more of that excellent coffee. He sat across from her at the big table, and they ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. "This is delicious," Evelyn finally said. "Where did you learn to cook?" "Had to learn. It was that or starve." He took a sip of his coffee. "You cook?" "Enough to get by. My mother tried to teach me, but I was never much interested in domestic arts." "What were you interested in?" "Books, mostly. History, literature, philosophy. All the things a woman's not supposed to care about." "Says who?" "Says everyone." Evelyn set down her fork. "Don't pretend you haven't heard it before. Women are supposed to be decorative and obedient. We're not supposed to have opinions or ambitions or thoughts beyond catching a husband and bearing children." Sounds like a waste of a perfectly good brain. The response was so unexpected that Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed. Something she hadn't done in weeks. "That's what I always thought." "Then you thought right." Clayton stood and refilled their coffee cups. "World's full of opinions about what people should and shouldn't be. Most of those opinions aren't worth the breath it takes to speak them. Easy to say when you're a man. True enough. I won't pretend I know what it's like to be a woman in this world." He sat back down, cradling his coffee cup in both hands. "But I know what it's like to have people decide who you are before you open your mouth. I know what it's like to be judged for things you can't control." "What things?" He looked at her and something flickered in his eyes, old pain, carefully contained. "That's a story for another time. Maybe." They finished breakfast in silence. Clayton was washing dishes when Evelyn stood to help, and he waved her off. "I've got this. Why don't you go look at your wagon, figure out what we'll need to fix it?" "You don't have to help me fix it. You've already done more than enough." "Evelyn?" He turned to face her, his hands dripping soapy water. "I offered to help. I don't offer things I don't mean, so stop trying to refuse help you clearly need, and let's get your wagon fixed so you can be on your way. You're very direct. Life's too short for dancing around the truth." Evelyn couldn't argue with that. She nodded and headed outside. The morning was already warming up, promising another scorching day. Clayton had brought her wagon back sometime during the night. She hadn't even heard him leave. It sat in the yard now, looking even more pathetic in the daylight. She walked around it, assessing the damage. The wheel was ruined, as she'd known. But examining it more closely, she could see that several of the spokes in the other wheels were cracked too. This wagon had been on its last legs for a while. She'd just been too stubborn or too broke to admit it. "It's bad, isn't it?" She turned to find Clayton standing behind her, drying his hands on a towel. "It's worse than bad. This wheel's not the only problem. The whole wagon's falling apart." Clayton crouched down, running expert hands over the axles and wheels. "You're right. I can fix this wheel, but you'll have the same problem again in another 50 miles, maybe less." "So what do you suggest?" "How much is the wagon worth to you?" "Not much. I bought it cheap in St. Louis, knowing I'd probably have to abandon it eventually." "Then I'd suggest selling it to me. I can use the wood and parts. I'll give you fair price for it, and you can use that money to buy passage on the stage to New Mexico. Or you could buy a horse, if you prefer to ride." Evelyn's mind raced, calculating. The stage would be expensive, but safe. A horse would be cheaper, but more difficult, especially for a woman traveling alone. "How much would you give me for it?" Clayton named a figure that was more than fair, probably more than the wagon was worth, if she was honest. She started to argue, but he cut her off. "That's my offer. Take it or leave it." "You're being too generous." "I'm being practical. I need the lumber. You need the money. Seems like a fair trade to me." Evelyn wanted to refuse on principle, but pride was what had gotten her into this mess in the first place. Maybe it was time to try something different. "All right," she said. "You've got a deal." They shook on it, and Evelyn felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. This was a man who worked with his hands, who understood the value of labor and the dignity of earning what you had. "I'll need to go into town to arrange passage," she said. "When's the next stage through?" "Day after tomorrow, but you don't need to go into town. I'm headed there anyway for supplies.
I'll book your passage and pick up any provisions you need. Clayton, it's practical, he said again. No sense both of us making the trip when I'm going anyway. He was right, damn him. Fine,
But I'm paying for the supplies. Wouldn't have it any other way. He headed toward the barn, and Evelyn watched him go, feeling oddly off balance. She'd been so certain she had the world figured out. People were selfish, men were predators, and the only person she could rely on was herself. But Clayton Mercer was systematically dismantling every one of those certainties with his quiet competence and genuine kindness. It was deeply unsettling. She spent the morning helping Clayton with chores around the ranch. He didn't ask her to help, but she couldn't just sit idle while he worked. They repaired fence line, fed cattle, and hauled water. Clayton explained what he was doing as they worked, never talking down to her or assuming she couldn't handle the physical labor. By noon, they were both hot, dusty, and exhausted. Clayton pulled up the pump handle and ducked his head under the cold water, and Evelyn found herself staring at the way his wet shirt clung to his shoulders. She looked away quickly, annoyed with herself. This wasn't the time or place for whatever that was. "Your turn," Clayton said, stepping back from the pump. Evelyn gratefully doused herself with cold water, gasping at the shock of it. When she straightened, she found Clayton watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing, just thinking you're tougher than you look." "I've had to be." "I believe it." He grabbed the towel from where it hung on the pump and handed it to her. "Let's get some lunch. Then I'll head into town." They ate cold chicken and bread on the porch, looking out over the ranch. In the daylight, Evelyn could see the scope of Clayton's operation. Cattle dotted the hills, grazing peacefully. The land stretched out in every direction, vast and beautiful and unforgiving. "It's a good piece of land," she said. "It is. I was lucky to get it when I did. Another year and it would have been snapped up." You've done well with it." "I've tried." He set down his plate. "It was supposed to be, well, it doesn't matter what it was supposed to be. It's what it is now." Evelyn heard the pain behind the words, the careful way he'd edited himself. "You weren't always alone here." It wasn't a question. Clayton looked at her, and for a moment she thought he might actually tell her. Then he stood, brushing crumbs from his trousers. "I should head to town before it gets too late. You need anything besides stage passage? Some beef jerky for the journey, and ammunition if the mercantile has it." "What caliber?" She told him, and he nodded. "I'll be back before dark. Make yourself at home." He was gone within the hour, riding off on his roan horse. Evelyn watched him disappear down the trail, then turned to survey the ranch. "Make yourself at home," he'd said, as if that were a simple thing. She spent the afternoon exploring, telling herself it was curiosity and not nosiness. The ranch was well run, but showed signs of neglect in small ways. The flower beds, the dust on the porch furniture, the way certain rooms in the house looked like they hadn't been entered in years. She found herself in what must have been a nursery once. There was a cradle in the corner, dusty and empty, a rocking chair by the window, pale blue paint on the walls, faded now with time and sunlight. Evelyn backed out of the room quickly, her heart aching for a man she barely knew and a loss she could only guess at. She was back on the porch when Clayton returned, riding into the yard as the sun began its descent. He dismounted with packages in his arms. "Got everything you needed," he said, setting the parcels on the porch. "Stage leaves day after tomorrow at 9. I booked you passage to Albuquerque, closest stop to your cousin's place. How much do I owe you?" He named the amount, and she counted it out from her small savings. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the money, and Evelyn felt an unexpected spark of something. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." "You're welcome." He looked like he wanted to say more, but settled for tipping his hat. "I'll make dinner in an hour." They fell into a strange routine over the next day and a half. Evelyn helped with chores during the day, and they ate meals together, conversation flowing more easily with each passing hour. Clayton told her about the ranch, the challenges of running cattle in harsh territory, the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. Evelyn told him about her childhood, her parents, her love of books and learning. What they didn't talk about was the future. They didn't talk about tomorrow morning when the stage would come and Evelyn would leave, probably never to see Clayton Mercer again. On her last evening, they sat on the porch as the sun set, drinking coffee in comfortable silence. "You could stay longer," Clayton said suddenly. "If you wanted." Evelyn's heart jumped. "Stay?" "I could use help around the ranch. I'd pay fair wages. And it would give you time to, I don't know, figure out what you want to do next." "Clayton, never mind." He stood abruptly. "Forget I said anything. You've got plans, and I've got no right to interfere with them." He disappeared into the house before she could respond. Evelyn sat on the porch long after the sun had set, thinking about the offer, thinking about staying, thinking about a man with sad gray eyes and careful hands who cooked breakfast and mended fences and carried loneliness like a weight he'd learned to balance. Tomorrow she'd leave. Tomorrow she'd get on that stage and ride away from Clayton Mercer and his ranch and these strange 2 days that had felt oddly like coming home. But tonight she could admit, at least to herself, that part of her didn't want to go. The stage was due at 9 in the morning, but Evelyn woke before dawn, unable to sleep. She lay in the hay of the loft, watching the first pale light creep through the window, and tried to convince herself that leaving was the right choice. Clayton Mercer was a stranger. 2 days didn't change that. 2 days of shared meals and easy conversation and comfortable silences didn't mean anything. People helped each other out here. He'd said so himself. It was survival, not sentiment. But then why did her chest feel tight at the thought of never seeing him again? She dressed quietly and climbed down from the loft. The barn was empty, the horses already turned out to pasture. Through the open door she could see lamplight in the ranch house kitchen. Clayton was up early too, it seemed. Evelyn walked slowly across the yard, her boots leaving dark prints in the dew-wet dirt. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. It would be a good day for traveling, not too hot, clouds building in the west that might bring relief by afternoon. She knocked on the kitchen door, then pushed it open when Clayton called out. He stood at the stove, his back to her, and for a moment she just watched him. There was something peaceful about the scene, the quiet competence of his movements, the way morning light slanted through the window and caught the steam rising from the coffee pot. It was domestic and simple and somehow achingly lonely all at once. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's ready." "You're up early?" "Couldn't sleep." He finally looked at her, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd had as restless a night as she had. "Figured I might as well make myself useful." Evelyn poured herself coffee and sat at the table. They'd eaten here together 4 times now. Dinner that first night, breakfast and dinner yesterday, breakfast this morning. 4 meals weren't enough to make it familiar, but somehow it felt that way. Like she'd been sitting at this table for years instead of hours. "Stage comes at 9, Clayton said, setting a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "That gives us about 3 hours. I'm packed and ready." "I know. I heard you moving around in the loft at 4 this morning." "I'm sorry if I woke you." "You didn't. Like I said, I couldn't sleep either." He sat down across from her with his own plate but didn't eat, just pushed the food around with his fork. "Evelyn, about last night, you don't have to explain." "Yes, I do." He set down his fork and looked at her directly. "I shouldn't have asked you to stay. You've got plans, a cousin waiting for you. I had no business trying to interfere with that." "You weren't interfering, you were offering work." "Was I?" His gray eyes held hers. "Because it felt like more than that when I said it." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. "Clayton, let me finish." He took a breath. "I don't make friends easily. Don't let people close. Lost too much to risk it again. But these past 2 days with you, they've been good. Better than good. And when I think about you leaving this morning, getting on that stage and riding out of my life forever, it sits wrong in my chest. So I asked you to stay, even though I knew I shouldn't." "Why shouldn't you?" "Because you deserve better than what I can offer. Better than a half-broken man living on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, cooking meals for one and trying to forget." He stopped himself. "You deserve a fresh start, Evelyn. Not someone else's tragedy." The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn set down her coffee cup carefully, her mind racing. She could let this go, could pretend the conversation never happened and get on that stage in 3 hours. Or she could be honest for once in her life about what she wanted. "What if I don't want a fresh start?" she said quietly.
What if I'm tired of running towards something that might not even exist? My cousin is kind, and I'm grateful for her offer. But Clayton, I've been running my whole life, running from a town that decided who I was before I could decide for myself. Running from people who looked at me and saw a problem to be fixed instead of a person to be known. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of running. So stay. The words came out rough, almost desperate. Stay and help me run this ranch. Stay and eat meals at this table. Stay and... He stopped, seeming to realize how much he was revealing. Just stay. Evelyn wanted to. God, she wanted to more than she'd wanted anything in a long time. But she'd learned the hard way that wanting something didn't make it wise. Tell me why you're alone here, she said. Tell me what happened, and then I'll decide. Clayton's jaw tightened. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood and walked to the window, staring out at the ranch he'd built. Her name was Sarah, he said finally. I met her in Denver 8 years ago. She was a school teacher, smart and kind and so damn beautiful it hurt to look at her. I was just a cowhand back then, working ranches and saving every penny. But she saw something in me, something worth investing in. He paused, and Evelyn waited, knowing this story had to come out at its own pace. We got married that spring, moved out here with everything we owned in a wagon and enough money to file a claim on this land. Sarah loved it, the space, the freedom, the challenge of building something from nothing. She planted those rose bushes on the porch. Painted the bedroom yellow because she said it was the color of hope. Evelyn's throat tightened. She could picture it, a young couple full of dreams working side by side to carve out a life. We had 3 good years, Clayton continued. Built the house, got the herd going, made friends with the neighboring ranchers, and then Sarah got pregnant. We were so happy, spent months getting ready, painting the nursery, building the cradle. Sarah sang to the baby every night, told stories about all the things they'd do together. He stopped, and Evelyn saw his hands grip the windowsill. She went into labor early, too early. I rode for the doctor, but he was gone, emergency at another ranch. By the time I got back, his voice cracked. She was bleeding, so much blood. The baby, a boy, he came too soon, lived for 3 hours, just long enough for us to hold him, to name him James after my father. Then he was gone. And Sarah, she held on for 2 more days. Kept telling me she was sorry, like it was her fault, like she'd failed somehow. Then she died too, and I buried them both under the oak tree on the East Ridge. Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face. Clayton, I'm so sorry. That was 5 years ago. Years. He turned to face her, and his eyes were dry but devastated. 5 years, and I still set 2 plates out sometimes before I remember. Still wake up reaching for her. Still walk past that nursery and hear ghost echoes of the lullabies she used to sing. Is that why you helped me? Because you couldn't help them? Maybe. Probably. He crossed back to the table and sat down heavily. After Sarah died, I shut down. Stopped going to town except when I had to. Stopped talking to neighbors. Just worked myself half to death every day so I'd be too tired to think at night. And it worked mostly, until 2 days ago when I saw a woman stranded on a trail at sunset, and something in me couldn't ride past. I'm glad you didn't. Are you? Because I'm not sure I am. He looked at her with raw honesty. You make me feel things I buried with Sarah. Make me want things I've got no business wanting. And that terrifies me, Evelyn, because I don't know if I can survive losing someone again. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers were cold despite the warm kitchen. I can't promise you won't lose me, she said. Life doesn't come with those guarantees. But I can promise that if I stay, it's because I want to. Not because I pity you or because I think I can fix you, but because these 2 days have been the most honest, most comfortable 2 days I've had in years. Because you see me as a person, not a problem. And because when I think about getting on that stage this morning, it feels like the wrong choice. What about your cousin? I'll write to her, explain the situation. Rosa will understand. She's the one who told me to follow my instincts. Evelyn squeezed his hand. My instincts are telling me to stay. Clayton looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. You're sure? No, but I haven't been sure about anything in a long time.
At least this uncertainty has you in it. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. That might be the strangest compliment I've ever received. I'm a strange woman. You should probably know that up front. I'd figured that out already. This time he did smile, small and tentative. Strange suits you. They finished breakfast with a new kind of tension between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with possibility. Evelyn kept catching herself looking at Clayton, noticing small things she'd missed before. The way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the scar on his right hand that she'd been too polite to ask about, the careful way he moved, like a man who'd learned to take up as little space as possible in his own home. After breakfast, Clayton rode into town to cancel her stage passage while Evelyn moved her belongings from the barn to the spare room in the house. The room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the eastern pasture and a bed that was infinitely better than hay in a loft. She unpacked her few possessions, 2 dresses, underclothes, her mother's Bible, the books she couldn't bear to leave behind, and tried not to think too hard about what she'd just agreed to. She was staying on a ranch with a man she barely knew, in territory where gossip spread faster than wildfire. The respectable thing would have been to get on that stage, to go to her cousin where propriety could be maintained. But Evelyn had stopped doing the respectable thing the day she sold her father's house, against everyone's advice. Respectability was just another cage, and she'd spent too many years imprisoned by other people's expectations. Clayton returned around noon with supplies and news. "Whole town's talking," he said as he unloaded parcels in the kitchen. "Mrs. Henderson at the Mercantile asked me 3 times if I was sure about taking in a single woman. Seemed to think I was risking my reputation." "What did you tell her?" "That I was hiring help for the ranch, and my reputation could survive the scandal." He set down a bag of flour and looked at her. "But she's right about one thing. People will talk. It might make things difficult for you." "People have been talking about me my whole life. I'm used to it." "That doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it manageable." Evelyn started putting supplies away, learning the layout of Clayton's kitchen. Besides, what are they going to say that they haven't already said? That I'm unmarriageable, that I'm unnatural, that I'll die alone? I've heard it all, Clayton. Their words lost their power to hurt me years ago. You're braver than you think. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. They worked together putting supplies away, and Evelyn marveled at how easy it was. No awkwardness, no stepping on each other's toes. They moved around the kitchen like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "I should warn you," Clayton said as he shelved canned goods, "the work here is hard. Early mornings, long days, everything from mending fence to doctoring cattle. It's not glamorous." "Good. I never wanted glamorous. I wanted real." "Then you'll fit right in, because this place is about as real as it gets." He showed her the ranch that afternoon, not just the house and barn she'd already seen, but the full scope of his operation. 500 acres of grazing land, 100 head of cattle, a small herd of horses. Creek running through the eastern section that provided water even in dry years. Stands of timber on the northern hills that could be logged if needed. "It's a good operation," Evelyn said as they rode the fence line on horses Clayton had saddled. "You've built something solid here." "I've tried. Sarah had most of the vision. I just did the heavy lifting." He pointed toward a grove of oak trees on a distant ridge. "That's where they're buried. I go there sometimes, talk to them, tell them about the ranch, about how the cattle are doing. Probably sounds foolish." "It doesn't sound foolish at all. It sounds like love." Clayton glanced at her, surprised. "Most people would say it's morbid, that I should move on. Most people haven't lost what you lost. And even if they had, they don't get to decide how you grieve." They rode in silence for a while, checking fence and looking for strays. The clouds that had been building all morning finally broke loose, sending down a gentle rain that was warm and welcome after days of dust. "We should head back," Clayton said, looking at the darkening sky. "This might turn into something serious." They made it back to the barn just as the rain intensified. Clayton showed Evelyn how to unsaddle and care for the horses properly, explaining his system for managing the tack and feed. She listened carefully, asking questions when she didn't understand. Clayton seemed pleased by her interest, his explanations becoming more animated as he talked about the things he knew best. "You really love this," Evelyn observed as they hung up the saddles to dry. "It's all I've got. Might as well love it." "That's not what I meant. You love it independent of anything else. The work itself, the rhythm of it, the challenge. You'd do this even if circumstances were different." Clayton paused, considering. "You're right. I would. There's something about working with animals and land that makes sense to me in a way people never have. Animals are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. Land's the same way. It'll reward honest work and punish shortcuts every time. Maybe that's why you're good at it. You're honest too." "I try to be, too. Seems like the least a man can offer." They ran through the rain to the house, laughing as they splashed through puddles in the yard. Inside, Evelyn helped Clayton start a fire in the living room stove to ward off the chill that came with the storm. They stood in front of it, dripping on the floor, and suddenly the absurdity of the situation hit them both. "I can't believe I'm here," Evelyn said, starting to laugh. "2 days ago I was stranded on a trail convinced I was going to die. Now I'm standing in a stranger's house, soaking wet, having just agreed to stay indefinitely." "When you put it that way, it does sound insane," Clayton admitted. "But then, most good things in life probably sound insane if you think about them too hard." "Is this a good thing?" Evelyn asked, suddenly serious. "Us, I mean, this arrangement." Clayton looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "I think it could be. If we're both honest about what we want and don't want. If we give it time to grow into whatever it's meant to be." "What do you want, Clayton?" "Right now? I want to get out of these wet clothes before I catch my death. Beyond that," he shrugged. "I don't know. Company, maybe. Someone to share this place with. Someone who sees it the way Sarah did, as a home, not just a business." "And what don't you want?" "I don't want to rush into anything. Don't want expectations or assumptions or pressure to be something I'm not ready to be. I've been alone a long time, Evelyn. I've gotten used to it. Changing that is going to take time." "That's fair. I'm not here to change you or fix you or fill some void in your life. I'm here because I need a place to figure out who I am when I'm not running or hiding or making myself small to fit other people's expectations. Then we understand each other. I think we do." They changed into dry clothes and spent the afternoon working on indoor chores, mending tack, oiling boots, organizing supplies. The rain continued steadily, drumming on the roof and streaming down the windows. It was cozy in a way Evelyn hadn't experienced since her mother was alive. She and Clayton worked in comfortable silence, occasionally exchanging observations or asking questions, but mostly just existing together in the same space. Evening came early with the storm. Clayton made dinner. Stew again, but different from the first night. This one had more vegetables, a richer broth, and herbs Evelyn didn't recognize. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" she asked as they ate. "Sarah taught me the basics. The rest I figured out through trial and error. Lots of error." He smiled slightly. "First year after she died, I burned more food than I ate. But eventually I got the hang of it. Turns out cooking's not that different from any other skill. You just have to practice and pay attention." My mother used to say that about everything. "Pay attention, Evelyn. The world will teach you what you need to know if you're willing to learn." "Your mother sounds like she was wise." She was. Wiser than I gave her credit for when she was alive. Evelyn pushed stew around her plate. "I spent so much time fighting her, trying to prove I was different, special, not like other girls. It wasn't until after she died that I realized she was just trying to protect me. She knew how hard the world would be for a woman who didn't fit the mold. She was right about that. But she was wrong about the solution. She thought if I could just make myself smaller, quieter, more acceptable, I'd be safe. But I wouldn't have been safe. I'd have been erased. And that's worse than being judged." Clayton set down his spoon. "I'm glad you didn't let them erase you. Even though it means I'm difficult and stubborn and unmarriageable. Especially because of that." His voice was firm. "The world has enough quiet, accommodating women. It needs more women like you, ones who ask questions and have opinions and refuse to apologize for taking up space." Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had said they liked her exactly as she was?
When was the last time she hadn't felt like she needed to defend or explain or justify her existence? "Thank you," she said quietly, "for saying that. Just stating facts, ma'am." They finished dinner and washed dishes together, another small domestic ritual that felt both strange and natural. Outside, the storm had intensified, lightning flashing in the distance and thunder rolling across the hills. "I should check the barn," Clayton said, looking out the window with concern. "Make sure the horses are settled and nothing's leaking." "I'll come with you." "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to learn. If I'm going to help run this place, I need to know what to do when storms come through." Clayton nodded, accepting her logic.
They bundled up in rain slickers and ran across the yard to the barn. The horses were restless with the storm, so they spent an hour calming them, checking stalls, and making sure everything was secure. Evelyn watched how Clayton moved among the animals, speaking softly, running calming hands over nervous flanks. The horses responded to him immediately, relaxing under his touch. "You have a gift with them," she said. "Not a gift, just patience. Animals respond to consistency and calm. If you're anxious, they're anxious. If you're steady, they're steady. I wish people worked that way. Some do. The good ones, anyway." By the time they finished in the barn, they were both soaked despite the slickers. They ran back to the house, and Clayton added more wood to the fire, while Evelyn changed into her nightgown and robe. When she came back downstairs, Clayton had made tea and was sitting in front of the fire, staring into the flames. Evelyn sat in the chair opposite him, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me stay. For trusting me. For treating me like a partner instead of a charity case." "You're not a charity case. You're—" He trailed off, seeming to search for the right words. "You're someone I'm glad to know, that's all." It wasn't all. They both knew it wasn't all. But it was enough for now, enough to build on, to explore, to let grow in its own time. They sat by the fire as the storm raged outside, two people learning to be less alone together. And if Clayton's chair eventually moved a little closer to hers, and if their hands almost touched on the armrest between them, well, that was nobody's business but their own. The storm passed sometime after midnight. Evelyn lay in her new bed, listening to the house settle and Clayton's quiet footsteps overhead as he moved around in his room. She thought about tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Thought about the work ahead, the challenges, the inevitable gossip when word spread that Evelyn Ward was living on Clayton Mercer's ranch. But mostly she thought about how, for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid, wasn't running, wasn't trying to be someone she wasn't. She was just Evelyn, and somehow that was enough. Morning came with brilliant sunshine and air scrubbed clean by the storm. Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Clayton moving around in the kitchen. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find him at the stove, as usual. "Morning," he said, glancing up with something that might have been a smile. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months. That bed is heaven compared to wagon camping." "Good. You'll need your rest. Today we're working the north pasture, checking cattle, looking for injuries or illness. It's a full day of riding." They ate quickly and headed out as the sun climbed. Clayton taught Evelyn how to spot signs of trouble in cattle, limping, isolation from the herd, changes in behavior. They found 2 cows with minor injuries that needed tending, and Clayton showed her how to rope and doctor them without causing more harm. "You're a natural," he said as Evelyn successfully roped her first cow on the 3rd try. Sarah took weeks to learn that. It was the first time he'd mentioned Sarah without pain shadowing his voice. Evelyn took it as a good sign. They worked until sunset, then rode back to the ranch tired and satisfied. Over dinner, Clayton asked about her life before, her childhood, her parents, what she'd hoped for before the world started telling her what she couldn't have. "I wanted to be a teacher," Evelyn admitted. "I loved learning, loved books. Thought maybe I could help other children discover that same love. But the school board in my town made it clear they'd never hire a woman with my reputation." "What reputation?" "The reputation for having opinions, for asking questions in church that made the pastor uncomfortable, for being seen reading philosophy instead of the Bible, for refusing to simper when men spoke to me." She shook her head. "Small towns have long memories and sharp teeth. Then it's their loss. Any school would be lucky to have you." "That's kind of you to say." It's not kindness, it's truth. Clayton leaned back in his chair. We're going to need a school out here eventually. More families are settling in the territory. Right now, parents teach their own kids if they're educated, and the kids go without if they're not. But in a few years, there'll be enough children to justify a proper school. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, just stating facts. If you wanted to teach, there might be opportunities here. Not now, but someday. Evelyn's heart lifted at the possibility. A future, a purpose beyond survival, a chance to be who she'd always wanted to be. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. That night, as Evelyn lay in bed, she thought about the strange path that had led her here. A broken wheel, a stranded wagon, a cowboy who'd refused to ride past someone in need. 2 days that had changed everything. She'd come west looking for a fresh start, a place where she could escape judgment and expectation. She'd found something better. A place where she could just be herself, difficult edges and stubborn heart and all. And maybe, just maybe, she'd found someone who understood what it was like to be broken and still worth knowing. In the morning, she'd start learning to really run a ranch. She'd work alongside Clayton, building something together. She'd write to her cousin Rosa and explain the change in plans. She'd face down whatever gossip came her way with her head high. But tonight, she'd sleep in a real bed, in a house that was starting to feel like home, knowing that for once in her life, she'd made exactly the right choice. Even if it had started with a broken wheel on a desert trail and a cowboy who said, "Forever starts with me," though neither of them had said the word forever yet. That was a conversation for another day, when they'd had time to become more than two lonely people finding comfort in shared space. For now, it was enough to be here, to be seen, to be known, and that was more than Evelyn Ward had dared to hope for in a very long time. The first week passed in a blur of work and routine. Evelyn rose with the sun each morning, learning the rhythm of ranch life under Clayton's patient instruction. He taught her how to read the sky for weather changes, how to spot a sick calf before it went downhill, how to mend fence wire so it would hold through winter. She absorbed it all with the same hunger for knowledge that had gotten her in trouble back home. Except here, her questions were welcomed instead of condemned. "You ask more questions than any 3 people I've ever met," Clayton said on the 5th day as they rode back from checking water troughs. But he was smiling when he said it, and there was no criticism in his tone. "Is that a problem?" "No. It's refreshing. Most people just nod and pretend they understand, then make the same mistakes over and over. You actually want to learn." "I spent too many years being told I asked too many questions, wanted to know too much. I'm done apologizing for being curious." "Good. Don't start now." They fell into an easy partnership that surprised them both. Evelyn proved to be quick with her hands, and even quicker with her mind, picking up skills that took most ranch hands months to learn. Clayton found himself explaining less and trusting more, letting her handle tasks he'd been doing alone for 5 years. The neighbors noticed, of course. On Sunday, when Clayton rode into town for supplies and Evelyn went with him, the stares and whispers started before they'd even hitched the horses. "Let them look," Clayton said quietly as they walked toward the mercantile. "They'll tire of it eventually." But Mrs. Henderson, who ran the mercantile with her husband, wasn't content with just looking. The moment they walked through the door, she descended on them with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd been storing up gossip all week. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Ward, how lovely to see you both." The words were sweet, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "I hear Miss Ward is staying on at your ranch now. How unconventional." "Miss Ward is my employee," Clayton said evenly. "I needed help with the ranch. She needed work. Nothing unconventional about it." "Oh, of course not. I simply meant that it's unusual for a single woman to work on a ranch. People do talk, you know." "Let them talk," Evelyn said before Clayton could respond. "I've been the subject of small-town gossip before, Mrs. Henderson. I assure you, I'll survive it." Mrs. Henderson's smile tightened. "Well, you certainly have spirit, I'll give you that. Though I wonder if Mr. Mercer's late wife would approve of—" "Ma'am," Clayton's voice went cold in a way Evelyn hadn't heard before. "With all due respect, my late wife's opinion isn't yours to speculate about. Now I need 50 pounds of flour, 20 of sugar, and whatever Miss Ward requires. Can you help us, or should we take our business elsewhere?" The mercantile went silent. Mrs. Henderson's face flushed red, and for a moment Evelyn thought the woman might actually throw them out. Then Mr. Henderson appeared from the back room, having clearly heard the exchange. "Now, Clara, let's not lose good customers over idle chatter," he said mildly. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Ward, welcome. Let me help you with those supplies." They completed their shopping in strained silence, but Evelyn noticed several other women watching from various corners of the store. Their expressions ranged from scandalized to curious to, surprisingly, envious. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, a woman approached. She was younger than Evelyn, maybe 23 or 24, with tired eyes and a baby on her hip. "Miss Ward," she said hesitantly, "I'm Anna Pritchard. My husband and I have the homestead 5 miles south of Mr. Mercer's place." "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Pritchard. I just wanted to say—" Anna glanced back at the mercantile, then continued quietly, "I think it's brave, what you're doing. Working the ranch, not caring what people say. I wish I had that kind of courage." "You homestead in Arizona territory with a baby," Evelyn said gently. "You have plenty of courage." "It's not the same. I did what was expected. Married young, followed my husband west, started a family. You're doing something different, something that scares people because it means the rules might change." She shifted the baby to her other hip. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know that not everyone thinks badly of you. Some of us think you're doing exactly what you should." "Thank you, Mrs. Pritchard. That means more than you know." Anna smiled, nodded to Clayton, and hurried back toward her own wagon before her husband could notice she'd been talking to the scandalous Miss Ward. "Well," Clayton said as they climbed onto the wagon seat, "that was eventful. I told you people would talk." "Talking's one thing, Mrs. Henderson practically accused you of—" He stopped, jaw tight. "Of what? Being your mistress? Ruining your reputation? Dishonoring your wife's memory?" Evelyn kept her voice light, though the words stung. "I've heard worse, Clayton, and I'll hear worse again before this is over. The question is whether you can handle it." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something fierce blazed in his gray eyes. "I can handle anything they throw at me. The question is whether it's fair to you." "Life isn't fair. If it were, your wife and son would be alive, and I'd have been born a man so I could pursue my dreams without permission. We play the hand we're dealt." "That's a grim philosophy." "It's a realistic one." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rattling over the rutted road. Finally, Clayton spoke again. "Sarah would have liked you." Evelyn's throat tightened. "You think so?" "I know so. She hated small-minded gossip, hated the way people tried to force everyone into neat little boxes. She used to say that the West was supposed to be about freedom, but people brought all their old prejudices with them and called it civilization." He smiled slightly. "She'd have been the first one to defend you to Mrs. Henderson. Probably would have done it more diplomatically than I did, but she'd have made her point. I wish I could have known her." "Me too." He was quiet for a moment. "It's strange talking about her with you. I haven't been able to talk about her with anyone since she died. People either avoid the subject entirely or speak about her in this hushed, reverential way, like she was a saint instead of a person. But with you, it feels natural. Like I can remember the real Sarah, not the perfect ghost everyone wants her to be." "She wasn't perfect?" "God, no. She was stubborn as hell, had a temper that could peel paint, and she couldn't cook to save her life. Burned everything. I mean everything. I learned to cook in self-defense." He laughed, and it was genuine, warm. But she was also kind and fierce and so full of life that sometimes just being near her made you feel more alive too. "She sounds wonderful." "She was, and she's gone, and life goes on, whether I want it to or not." He glanced at Evelyn. "You're helping with that. Helping me remember that there's still life to be lived, not just survived." Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just reached over and squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, and they rode the rest of the way home in comfortable silence. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine that felt less like employer and employee and more like partners. Evelyn took over most of the cooking, much to Clayton's relief, as it freed him up for other work. She proved to have a natural talent for it, creating meals that were simple but delicious. Clayton caught himself looking forward to dinner not just for the food, but for the conversation, the companionship, The way Evelyn's presence made the house feel alive again. They talked about everything during those evening meals: politics, philosophy, books they'd read, dreams they'd had. Evelyn told Clayton about her father's library, the one place where she'd been allowed to be herself, to read and think and question without judgment. Clayton told her about growing up in Kansas, about the father who'd taught him to work with his hands, and the mother who'd taught him to value education even when you couldn't afford formal schooling. She'd sneak books from the town library, he said one night, hide them in her apron and bring them home for us to read by candlelight. My father knew, but he never said anything, just made sure we had enough candles. They sound like good people. They were. Died young, both of them. Influenza outbreak when I was 19. I buried them a week apart, sold everything they owned, and headed west. Figured if I was going to be alone, I might as well be alone somewhere new. And then you met Sarah. And then I met Sarah and I wasn't alone anymore. Until I was. He looked into his coffee cup. I never thought I'd have this again. Not the same as what I had with Sarah, but companionship. Someone to share the day with. Someone who listens when I talk and talks back with actual thoughts instead of just agreeing with everything I say. I'm not very good at agreeing with people. I've noticed. It's one of your better qualities. The easy affection between them grew with each passing day. They'd brush hands reaching for the same tool, and neither would pull away quite as quickly as they should. They'd sit on the porch in the evenings, and their chairs would somehow end up closer together each night. Once, when a snake spooked her horse, Evelyn fell and Clayton caught her, and they stood there for a long moment, his arms around her waist, her hands on his shoulders, both of them suddenly aware of how close they were, how easy it would be to close that final distance. But they didn't. Not yet. There was an unspoken agreement between them that whatever this was becoming, it needed time to grow naturally, without pressure or expectation. Then the trouble started. It began with small things. Fence wire cut in the north pasture, letting a dozen head of cattle wander onto neighboring land. A broken water trough that looked like it had been smashed deliberately, tools going missing from the barn. Could be accidents, Clayton said, but his jaw was tight with anger he was trying to contain. Could be, Evelyn agreed, though they both knew it wasn't. The vandalism escalated. One morning they woke to find obscene words painted on the side of the barn. Another day, someone shot one of Clayton's best breeding cows and left it to rot in the field. This has to stop, Evelyn said as they buried the cow. We need to report it to the sheriff. The sheriff's office is in Redemption Creek, 30 miles away. By the time he gets here, investigates, and leaves, whoever's doing this will have struck again. We're on our own. Then what do we do? Clayton stabbed his shovel into the ground with more force than necessary. We keep our eyes open, we take shifts at night, and we hope they get bored and move on. But whoever was targeting them didn't get bored. 3 nights later, someone tried to set fire to the barn. Clayton heard the horses screaming and ran out in his nightshirt, Evelyn right behind him. They managed to put out the flames before they spread, but several bags of feed were ruined and the horses were traumatized. That's it, Clayton said, soot-streaked and furious. Tomorrow I'm riding to town and bringing the sheriff back here, even if I have to drag him by his badge. But tomorrow came with news that changed everything. They were eating breakfast when they heard horses approaching, multiple riders moving fast. Clayton grabbed his rifle and went to the door, Evelyn behind him with her own gun. 3 men rode into the yard, and Evelyn recognized one of them from town, the territorial marshal who'd been through Redemption Creek a month ago. The other 2 wore deputy badges. Mr. Mercer, the marshal said, dismounting, I'm Marshal Hayes. We need to talk. If this is about the vandalism on my property, it's not. It's about the Cooper family, 15 miles north of here. They were murdered 3 nights ago. Father, mother, 2 teenage sons, killed in their beds. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Clayton's hand tightened on his rifle. What does that have to do with us? He asked. There's a gang operating in the territory. The Daltrey gang, 5 men, maybe 6, led by Cass Daltrey. They've been hitting isolated ranches and homesteads, killing families, stealing what they can carry. We got word they might be in this area. Jesus Christ, Clayton breathed. We're forming a posse to track them down. Need every able-bodied man who can shoot and ride. You interested? Clayton looked back at Evelyn, conflict clear on his face. I can't leave my ranch undefended. The gang's moving south, away from here. Best way to protect your place is to help us catch them before they circle back. Marshal Hayes shifted in his saddle. Look, Mercer, I know you've had your own troubles lately. Vandalism, harassment. Word is it's because you took in Miss Ward here, and some folks don't approve. That's nobody's business but ours. Agreed, but right now we've got bigger problems than small-minded gossip. We've got murderers in the territory, and we need to stop them before another family dies. You in or not? Clayton was silent for a long moment. Evelyn could see him weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, he nodded. I'm in. When do we leave? Within the hour. Bring ammunition, supplies for 3 days. We're tracking them into rough country. After the marshal and his deputies left, Clayton went inside to prepare. Evelyn followed, her mind racing. You're really going, she said. I have to. You heard him. Another family died. I can't sit here safe while people are being murdered. I understand, but Clayton... She stopped, unsure how to voice the fear clawing at her chest. What if something happens to you? He paused in checking his ammunition and looked at her. I'll be careful. That's not a promise. It's the only one I can make. He crossed to her, putting his hands on her shoulders. Evelyn, I need you to stay here and keep the ranch running. Can you do that? Of course I can, but... And I need you to stay armed. Keep your rifle close at all times. If anyone comes around that you don't know, don't engage. Lock yourself in the house and fire warning shots if they don't leave. You think the vandals will come back while you're gone? I think cowards like to strike when people are vulnerable. Don't give them the chance. His hands tightened on her shoulders. Promise me you'll be careful. I will if you will. Deal. He started to step back, then stopped. Evelyn, there's something I need to say in case... Don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't say goodbye like you're not coming back. Say you'll see me in 3 days. Say you'll bring stories about terrible camp coffee and saddle sores. Say anything but goodbye. He caught her hand, holding it against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. I'll see you in 3 days, and I expect a decent meal waiting for me when I get back. I'll burn something special just for you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I've been falling in love with you since that first night, since I saw you standing by that broken wheel with your rifle raised and fire in your eyes. I need you to know that. Evelyn's breath caught. Clayton, I know we said we'd take things slow. I know we agreed not to rush. But I also know that I'm riding into danger, and if something happens, I need you to know that meeting you changed everything. You made me remember what it feels like to want tomorrow to come. She pulled his head down and kissed him, pouring 5 weeks of longing and fear and hope into it. He kissed her back with fierce tenderness, his arms wrapping around her like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Come back to me, Evelyn whispered. That's not a request. It's a demand. Yes, ma'am. He kissed her once more, quick and hard, then grabbed his gear and headed for the door. Evelyn followed him outside, where the marshal and his men were already gathering in the yard. Clayton mounted his roan, checking his rifle one last time. He looked down at Evelyn, and she saw everything he couldn't say in his eyes, fear and determination and something that looked achingly like love. 3 days, she called up to him. 3 days, he confirmed. Then he was riding away with the posse, and Evelyn stood in the yard watching until they disappeared over the eastern ridge. Only then did she let herself acknowledge the terror clawing at her throat. She'd told Clayton she'd been hearing all her life that she'd die alone. But the truth was, she'd made peace with that. What she couldn't make peace with was the idea of Clayton dying, of finally finding someone who saw her, valued her, maybe even loved her, only to have him ripped away by violence. Come back, she whispered to the empty horizon. Please come back. The first day alone passed slowly. Evelyn threw herself into work, maintaining the ranch routines Clayton had taught her. She fed the horses, checked the cattle, repaired fence in the south pasture. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But when night fell and she locked herself in the house, silence pressed in from all sides. She'd gotten used to Clayton's presence, his footsteps overhead, his occasional cough from the bedroom, the knowledge that she wasn't alone. Without him, the house felt enormous and empty. She tried to read, but the words swam on the page. Tried to sleep, but every sound jerked her awake. Wind rattling the windows, coyotes howling in the distance, the house settling. She kept her rifle beside the bed and barely slept at all. The second day was worse. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Evelyn spent the morning securing everything that might blow away. She brought the horses into the barn, double-checked that the cattle had access to shelter, and made sure the house was battened down tight. The storm hit at dusk, violent and sudden. Wind screamed around the house, rain lashed the windows, and lightning turned the world strobe bright. Evelyn stood at the window, watching trees bend nearly double, and tried not to think about Clayton out in this weather, riding through rough country, hunting murderers. "Be safe," she whispered. "Please be safe." The storm raged through the night. Evelyn dozed fitfully in a chair by the fire, starting awake at every crash of thunder. When dawn finally came, gray and sullen, she went outside to survey the damage. It could have been worse. Some shingles were missing from the barn roof, branches littered the yard, and one of the pasture gates had been torn off its hinges. But the buildings were intact, the animals were safe, and, most importantly, there were no signs that anyone had used the storm as cover to cause more vandalism. She spent the day cleaning up storm debris and making repairs where she could. The work was grueling, and by evening she was exhausted, covered in mud and splinters. But it felt good to be useful, to know she was maintaining what Clayton had built. She was rehanging the pasture gate when she heard horses approaching. Evelyn's heart leaped. Clayton was back early. But when she turned toward the sound, her relief died. These weren't the organized sounds of a posse returning. These were the careless sounds of men who didn't care who heard them coming. She counted 3 riders, strangers all, rough-looking men with hard eyes and guns worn low on their hips. Everything in her screamed danger. Evelyn walked quickly toward the house, trying not to run, trying not to show fear. She'd almost made it to the porch when one of the riders called out, "Hold on there, Missy. No need to rush off." She stopped, turning slowly. Her rifle was inside, out of reach. She had a pistol in her pocket, but 3 against 1 were bad odds. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Saw the storm damage," the leader said, dismounting. He was tall and lean, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Thought maybe you could use some help, for a price." "I'm managing fine, thank you. My husband will be home soon." "Your husband?" The man looked around theatrically. "Don't see any sign of a man living here. Place has that empty feel to it. Besides, we heard in town that Mercer rode out with the posse 2 days ago, hunting the Daltrey gang, they said." Evelyn's blood ran cold. These men had been asking about Clayton in town, which meant this wasn't a random visit. "You heard wrong," she lied. "He's up in the north pasture. I can call him if you'd like." "No need for that." The scarred man stepped closer, and his companions dismounted behind him. "See? We were also told that Mercer's got himself a woman living here, single woman from back east, woman who thinks she's too good for proper work, if you know what I mean." "I don't know what you mean, and I'd appreciate it if you'd leave my property." "Oh, we'll leave. But first we thought we'd deliver a message. See, some folks in town think Mercer's making a mistake, keeping you here. Think it's disrespectful to his late wife. Think maybe you need to be encouraged to move along." "And you 3 are here to do the encouraging?" "We're here to help you see reason. Now you can pack your things and leave peaceable-like, or—" He let the threat hang in the air. Evelyn's hand moved toward her pocket, toward the pistol hidden there. But the scarred man saw the movement and grabbed her wrist, twisting hard. Pain shot up her arm. Now. Let's not do anything stupid. Let me go." "Or what? You'll scream? Won't do you any good out here. Nobody to hear you but the coyotes." He was right. They were miles from the nearest neighbor, and Clayton was gone. She was alone with 3 men who meant her harm, and nobody was coming to help. But Evelyn Ward hadn't survived 26 years of being underestimated by giving up when things got hard. She drove her knee up hard into the scarred man's groin. He released her with a howl of pain, staggering back. Evelyn ran for the house, but one of the other men caught her before she made it to the porch, his arms locking around her waist. "You little wildcat," he snarled in her ear. "We're going to teach you some manners." Evelyn bit down hard on his arm. He screamed and threw her to the ground. She hit the dirt hard enough to knock the wind out of her, stars exploding across her vision. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the men closing in. Then a rifle shot cracked across the yard, and everyone froze. Touch her again, and the next shot goes through your skull instead of over it. Evelyn looked up through streaming eyes to see Clayton on his horse at the edge of the yard, rifle aimed steady at the scarred man's head. Behind him, Marshal Hayes and 3 deputies spread out, their own weapons drawn. "We're leaving," the scarred man said, raising his hands. "Just trying to help the lady." By threatening her? By putting your hands on her? Clayton's voice was deadly quiet. "Marshal, I want these men arrested." "On what charge?" "Trespassing, assault, attempted." Clayton's jaw worked. "Just arrest them." The deputies moved in, disarming the 3 men and binding their hands. The scarred man spat on the ground as they led him past Clayton. "You're making a mistake, Mercer, keeping that woman. She's gonna ruin you." Clayton dismounted in one smooth motion and punched the man so hard he went down like a felled tree, blood streaming from his nose. "Anyone else have opinions about my choices?" Clayton asked the other 2 prisoners. They wisely said nothing. Marshal Hayes supervised as his deputies loaded the 3 men onto their horses. "We'll take them back to town, lock them up for a few days. But Mercer, you need to understand, these men are just symptoms. Someone sent them. Someone with money and influence." "I know, and I'll deal with that when I'm ready. Right now I need to see to Miss Ward." The marshal nodded and rode out with his prisoners. The moment they were gone, Clayton was at Evelyn's side, helping her up with gentle hands. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine. Bruised, but fine." She clung to his arms, her legs unsteady. "You came back." "I told you I would. We caught up with the Daltrey gang yesterday, cornered them in a canyon. It was bad. But it's over. They're dead or captured, and the territory's safer for it." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "When we got close to the ranch and I heard that rifle shot, I thought, 'I'm fine,'" she said again. "I'm fine because you came home." He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there in the yard, holding each other as the sun set behind them. Evelyn could feel his heart racing against her chest, could feel him shaking slightly with adrenaline and relief. "I was so scared," she whispered into his shirt. "I've never been that scared in my life." "Me too. The whole ride back, all I could think about was getting to you, making sure you were safe." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Evelyn, we need to talk about this. About us. About what happens next." "I know, but not tonight. Tonight I just need to know you're here and real, and not a ghost I'm going to wake up from." "I'm here. I'm real. And I'm not going anywhere." They went inside, and Clayton built up the fire while Evelyn made coffee with shaking hands. They sat together on the sofa, closer than partners, not quite as close as lovers, and Evelyn told him everything that had happened while he was gone. Clayton listened, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. "This has to stop," he said when she finished. "The harassment, the vandalism, men showing up threatening you. I won't live like this, and I won't let you live like this." "What can we do?" Marshal Hayes said these men were sent by someone with influence. "Then I'll find out who sent them, and I'll make it clear that touching you, threatening you, so much as looking at you wrong will answer to me. Clayton, you can't fight the whole territory. Watch me." He turned to face her fully. "Evelyn, I meant what I said before I left. I'm in love with you, and that means I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, even if it means making enemies of every small-minded bigot from here to California. You could lose everything, the ranch, your reputation, your place in the community. I don't care. None of it matters if you're not here to share it with me." Evelyn's heart was so full she thought it might burst. "I love you too. I think I've loved you since that first night when you offered help with no strings attached and actually meant it." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "So what do we do?" Evelyn asked. "How do we fight back?" "We don't fight back. We move forward. We live our lives, run this ranch, and refuse to let them intimidate us into hiding or leaving. And if that's not enough—" He paused. "There's one thing that would make it very clear that you're not going anywhere." "What's that?" "We could get married." Evelyn's breath caught. "Clayton, I know it's fast. I know we agreed to take things slow, but Evelyn, this feels right. You feel right. And maybe part of it is wanting to protect you from gossip and harassment, but most of it is just wanting to be with you, officially, permanently. Forever. Forever, Evelyn repeated softly. That's a long time. It is. So I'm not asking for an answer tonight. Think about it. Consider what you'd be taking on. A widow with more ghosts than closet space, a ranch in rough territory, and a lifetime of fighting prejudice and small minds. He smiled crookedly. Not exactly a fairy tale proposal. I don't want a fairy tale. I want real. She took his hand. And yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Not because it will stop the gossip. It won't. Not because I need protection, though I appreciate the gesture. But because when I imagine my future, you're in it. And I'd rather make that official than keep pretending we're just partners running a ranch. Clayton stared at her for a long moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd heard. Then he was kissing her again, deeper this time, with heat and hunger, and a promise of everything to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clayton rested his forehead against hers. I don't have a ring, he said. Sarah's wedding ring is buried with her, and I can't... I don't need a ring. I just need you. You'll have one anyway. My grandmother's ring is in a box upstairs. It would have been my mother's, but she died before my father could give it to her. It's yours if you want it. I'd be honored to wear it. They sat together by the fire, making plans and promises as the night deepened around them. Tomorrow they'd ride into town and announce their engagement, face down the gossip and judgment together. Tomorrow they'd start building their future in earnest. But tonight, they were just two people who'd found each other against all odds, learning what it meant to be less alone together. And that was more than either of them had dared to hope for when a wagon wheel broke on a desert trail and a cowboy said the words that would change everything. Forever starts with me. Morning came too early and not early enough. Evelyn woke in her own bed, alone, but when she came downstairs, Clayton was already in the kitchen making coffee, and the smile he gave her made her heart skip. On his finger was a simple gold band, his wedding ring from Sarah, she realized. He'd never taken it off in 5 years. But this morning, it sat on his right hand instead of his left. Coffee's ready, he said, pouring her a cup. And I've been thinking, should I be worried? Probably. He set the cup in front of her. I want to ride into town today. File notice of our intent to marry with the territorial clerk. Talk to the circuit preacher about when he'll be through next. Make it official before anyone can talk us out of it. You think someone will try? I think when people realize I'm serious about marrying you, they'll try everything they can think of to stop it. Better to move fast and present them with a done deal than give them time to organize opposition. Evelyn sipped her coffee, considering. He was right, of course. Small towns ran on gossip and interference, and their engagement would be the juiciest scandal to hit Redemption Creek in years. Then let's go. The sooner we face them, the sooner we can move forward. Clayton pulled a small wooden box from his pocket and opened it. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a ring. Delicate gold with a small but perfect sapphire surrounded by tiny seed pearls. It was beautiful in an old-fashioned way, the kind of ring that carried history in every scratch and tarnish mark. My grandmother wore this for 50 years, Clayton said quietly, through good times and bad, through loss and joy. She used to say it wasn't the ring that mattered, but the promises behind it. He took Evelyn's hand. I can't promise you an easy life. Can't promise the gossip will stop or that people will accept us, but I can promise that I'll stand beside you through whatever comes. That I'll see you, really see you, every day of our lives together, and that I'll never ask you to be smaller or quieter or less than who you are. Evelyn's eyes stung with tears. That's all I've ever wanted, to be seen and valued for who I am, not who people think I should be. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for her. Evelyn stared at it, this tangible symbol of promises made and futures hoped for. It's beautiful, she whispered. So are you. They rode into Redemption Creek mid-morning, side by side on their horses. Evelyn wore her best dress, not fancy, but clean and respectable. Clayton had shaved and put on his good shirt. They looked like what they were, working people making an honest life together. The town noticed them immediately. Conversation stopped as they passed. Women clutched their shopping baskets tighter. Men frowned and muttered to each other. By the time they reached the territorial clerk's office, they had an audience. The clerk, a thin man named Hoskins with wire-rimmed spectacles, looked up from his ledger as they entered. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Ward, what can I do for you?" "We'd like to file notice of intent to marry," Clayton said, his voice carrying clearly. Through the open door, Evelyn could see people gathering outside, trying to hear. Hoskins' eyebrows shot up. "Mary. I see. And how long have you two known each other?" "Long enough," Clayton said flatly. "Is there a legal requirement I'm not aware of?" No, just surprising is all." Hoskins pulled out the necessary forms. "I'll need both your full names, dates of birth, and a witness to sign." They provided the information while Hoskins filled out the paperwork with meticulous slowness. Evelyn could feel the weight of eyes on them, hear the whispers growing outside. "Now, as for a witness," Hoskins began. "I'll witness it." Everyone turned to see Anna Pritchard standing in the doorway, her baby still on her hip. She walked forward with her chin up, ignoring the scandalized gasps from the other women outside. "Mrs. Pritchard," Clayton said, surprised, "you don't have to—" "I know I don't have to. I want to." She set the baby down carefully and took the pen Hoskins offered. "Miss Ward was kind to me when she didn't have to be. Defended her right to live her life without apologizing. That takes courage. I'd be honored to witness her marriage." She signed with a flourish, then picked up her baby and walked out, head high. Through the window, Evelyn saw Anna's husband waiting outside, his face tight with anger. Anna spoke to him quietly, and whatever she said made him nod reluctantly and take the baby from her. "Well," Hoskins said, clearly uncomfortable with the drama. "That's done then. Notice is filed. You'll need to wait 3 days, then any preacher or judge can perform the ceremony." "The circuit preacher's due through in a week," Clayton said. "We'll speak with him about arrangements." They left the office to find half the town gathered outside. Mrs. Henderson stood at the front of the crowd, her face pinched with disapproval. "Mr. Mercer," she called out, "surely you're not serious about this? Marrying a woman you've known barely 2 months? A woman of questionable character who's been living alone with you on your ranch?" "Mrs. Henderson," Clayton said, his voice dangerously quiet, "Miss Ward's character is beyond question. She's brave, intelligent, hardworking, and kind. All qualities that seem to be in short supply in this town. And yes, I'm absolutely serious about marrying her. Is there anyone else who'd like to question my judgment?" Silence fell. Then a man in the back, one of the local ranchers, spoke up. "Mercer's got a right to marry who he chooses, and from what I hear, Miss Ward knows her way around a ranch. Could do worse for a wife." "Thank you, Tom," Clayton said, nodding to the man. "Don't thank me, just stating facts." Tom touched his hat brim to Evelyn. "Welcome to the territory, Miss Ward. Hope you'll be happy here." It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the wall of disapproval. Other ranchers in the crowd shifted, a few nodding agreement. The women remained silent, but Evelyn noticed a few younger ones watching with something that might have been envy. Mrs. Henderson's face turned red. "This is an outrage. The man's wife hasn't been dead 5 years, and he's already replacing her with someone who makes me want to wake up in the morning," Clayton interrupted. "Someone who reminds me that life isn't just about surviving loss, but about finding joy again. Sarah's been gone 5 years, Mrs. Henderson. I loved her. I'll always love her. But she's gone, and I'm still here, and I have a right to build a future with someone who sees that future as worth building." He took Evelyn's hand, and she felt the tremor in his fingers, not fear, but barely controlled anger. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a ranch to run. Good day." They walked through the crowd together, and this time people stepped aside to let them pass. Evelyn kept her head high, her hand tight in Clayton's, and tried not to show how much Mrs. Henderson's words had stung. They were halfway to their horses when a man stepped into their path. He was well dressed, with the soft hands and careful grooming of someone who'd never done hard labor. Evelyn recognized him from the mercantile, always there on Sundays, always holding court with other prosperous-looking men. "Mr. Mercer?" the man said smoothly.
James Cartwright. I own the land adjacent to yours on the western border. I know who you are, Cartwright. What do you want? Just a friendly word. I couldn't help but overhear your plans to marry. Congratulations, of course.
But I wonder if you've considered how this might affect your standing in the community. My standing is my concern. Of course, of course. But you see, I've been meaning to speak with you about your land. Prime grazing property, good water access. I'd be willing to make you a very generous offer, enough to start fresh somewhere else, somewhere people might be more accepting of unconventional arrangements. Clayton's jaw tightened. My land isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price, Mr. Mercer, and I think you'll find that life here will become increasingly difficult for you and your bride if you insist on defying social conventions. Accidents happen, fences get cut, cattle wander off. It would be a shame if... Clayton moved so fast, Evelyn barely saw it. One moment Cartwright was talking, the next Clayton had him by the collar, lifted slightly off his feet. Are you threatening me, Cartwright? I'm simply stating facts. Here's a fact for you. The 3 men who came to my ranch yesterday who put their hands on Miss Ward and threatened her, they're sitting in jail right now, and I intend to find out who sent them. If I discover it was you, I'll make sure Marshal Hayes knows about it. Are we clear? Cartwright's face had gone pale. You can't prove anything. Maybe not, but I can make your life very uncomfortable while I try. Small towns work both ways. You can use gossip as a weapon, but so can I. And I wonder what people would say if they knew you were trying to drive out a widow who lost everything, all so you could expand your holdings. Clayton released him, and Cartwright stumbled back, adjusting his collar with shaking hands. This isn't over, Mercer. Yes, it is. Stay away from my land, stay away from my fiancée, and we'll have no problems. But if I find out you're behind any more harassment, Clayton let the threat hang. They mounted their horses and rode out of town, leaving Cartwright standing in the street and half the town watching from windows and doorways. Neither of them spoke until they were well clear of Redemption Creek. That was Cartwright behind the vandalism, Evelyn said finally. Wasn't it? Probably. Can't prove it, but it fits. He's been trying to buy my land since Sarah died. Thought I'd sell once I was alone, that I couldn't manage without her. When I didn't, he waited for another opportunity. And I gave him one. No. He created one by being a greedy bastard who thinks he can bully people into selling. Clayton glanced at her. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I'm not in the middle. I'm on your side. There's a difference. He smiled at that, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. How did I get so lucky to find you? A broken wagon wheel and good timing. Best timing of my life. They spent the afternoon working the ranch together, checking cattle and repairing storm damage. The work was hard but satisfying, and Evelyn found herself thinking about the future, their future now, officially. What would their life look like a year from now? 5 years? Would they have children? Would the town ever accept them, or would they always be outsiders? That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clayton seemed to read her thoughts. You're worried, he said, about what happens next. I'm thinking about it. There's a difference. Same thing I said earlier. I learned from the best. She leaned against his shoulder, and his arm came around her naturally. Do you think it will always be this hard? The fighting, the gossip, the threats? Honestly, I don't know. Some people will never accept us, but others will. Tom backed us up in town today. Anna witnessed our filing. That's a start. Your neighbors will think I trapped you somehow, that I used feminine wiles to catch a prosperous rancher. Clayton snorted. Anyone who thinks you're the type to use feminine wiles doesn't know you at all. You're about as subtle as a thunderstorm. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. And yes, it's a compliment. I like that you say what you mean. Makes life simpler. Speaking of saying what you mean, Evelyn sat up to look at him directly. Where will I sleep after we're married? Clayton's face flushed slightly. That's up to you. The spare room is yours for as long as you want it, or... He cleared his throat. Or you could share my room. Our room. If that's what you want. What do you want? I want you close. I want to wake up beside you and fall asleep knowing you're there. But Evelyn, I won't rush you into anything physical you're not ready for. We can take that part as slow as we need to. Because of Sarah? Because of both of us. You've never... He paused delicately. Have you ever been with a man? No. My reputation suggested otherwise, but the truth is, I've barely been kissed until you. She smiled slightly. Turns out being difficult and opinionated isn't actually seductive. Their loss. Clayton took her hand, running his thumb over her knuckles. I'm not saying I don't want you. I do. But I want us to be ready. Both of us. There's no rush. We're getting married in a week. So? Marriage is a legal arrangement and a public commitment. What happens between us privately is our business, and we'll figure it out as we go. No expectations, no pressure, just us. Evelyn leaned in and kissed him, soft and lingering. You're a good man, Clayton Mercer. I'm trying to be. For you. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Evelyn wrote to her cousin Rosa, explaining everything that had happened and inviting her to the wedding. Rosa's response came back faster than expected, full of excitement and support. I knew something good would come from you heading west, Rosa wrote, and I'm so happy you found someone who sees you for who you are. I wish I could be there, but the homestead can't be left right now. But know that I'm thinking of you and celebrating from afar. Be happy, cousin. You deserve it. Clayton's neighbors from the surrounding ranches started dropping by, ostensibly to check on cattle or discuss water rights, but really to size up Evelyn and the situation. Most were polite if reserved. A few were openly friendly. Tom Harris, the rancher who'd spoken up in town, brought his wife Mary to meet Evelyn. Don't mind the gossips, Mary said as they shared coffee on the porch. Small towns always need something to talk about. This time next year, they'll have moved on to scandalize someone else. I hope you're right. I am. Besides, you're not the first woman to marry quickly out here, and you won't be the last. Life's too short and too hard to waste time courting for years. Mary smiled warmly. Clayton's a good man. Lost too much too young. I'm glad he's found happiness again. The circuit preacher, Reverend Walsh, arrived on Tuesday. He was an older man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that Evelyn appreciated immediately. So you two want to get married, he said over dinner at the ranch. Tell me why. Evelyn and Clayton exchanged glances. Finally, Evelyn spoke. Because we're better together than apart. Because he sees me as an equal partner, not a problem to be managed. Because when I think about the future, I want him in it. And you, Mr. Mercer? Because she makes me remember what it's like to be alive instead of just surviving. Because she's brave and smart and doesn't apologize for taking up space in the world. And because I love her. Reverend Walsh nodded slowly. Those are good reasons. Better than most, I hear. He looked at Clayton seriously. I knew your Sarah. Married you to, in fact. Lovely woman, gone too soon. I won't ask if you're over her death, because a man doesn't get over losing his wife and child. But I will ask if you've made peace with it enough to build a new life. I have. Sarah will always be part of me, but Evelyn is my future. I've thought a lot about this, Reverend. About whether it's too soon, whether I'm being fair to either of them. But the truth is, Sarah would want me to be happy. She'd want me to find love again, and I have. Then I'll marry you, this Sunday after service. The whole town's invited, as usual, but it's up to you whether you want that or something private. Public, Evelyn said firmly. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. No hiding, no shame. Public it is. I'll make the announcement Sunday morning. The week crawled by and flew past simultaneously. Evelyn cleaned the house until it shone, then realized she was nervous and made herself stop. Clayton rode into town for supplies and came back with fabric for a new dress. I know it's not much, he said, handing her the wrapped parcel, but I wanted you to have something special to wear. The fabric was beautiful. Soft blue cotton, the color of summer sky, with tiny white flowers embroidered along the edge. Evelyn's throat tightened. Clayton, this is too much. It's not nearly enough, but it's what I can offer right now. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You deserve silk and lace and all the fine things I can't afford. But I can give you this, and the promise that I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret choosing you. Anna Pritchard showed up the next day with her sewing basket. I heard about the wedding fabric, she said. Thought you might need help making it into a dress by Sunday. I'm a decent seamstress. Anna, you don't have to. I want to. Consider it my wedding gift. She set down her basket and pulled out measuring tape. Now hold still. We have work to do. They spent 2 days sewing together, and Evelyn learned that Anna had dreams of her own. Dreams of opening a dress shop someday, of doing more than just surviving on a hard-scrabble homestead. My husband thinks it's foolish, Anna said as she pinned the hem. Says a woman's place is home with her children, but I see how you and Mr. Mercer work together like real partners, and I think maybe that's possible. Maybe I don't have to choose between being a wife and being myself. You don't, Evelyn said firmly. You should never have to make yourself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. Easy to say, harder to do. I know. But look at us. We're doing it right now. 2 women sewing a wedding dress and talking about dreams. That's not small. That's revolutionary. Anna smiled. Maybe you're right. Maybe it is. Saturday evening, the dress was finished. Evelyn tried it on and Anna's eyes filled with tears. You look beautiful. Mr. Mercer is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you. Evelyn looked at herself in the small mirror. The dress fit perfectly, skimming her figure without being immodest, the blue bringing out the color of her eyes. She looked like herself, but somehow more, like the woman she'd always wanted to be but never had the courage to embrace. Thank you, Anna, for everything. Thank you for showing me it's possible to be yourself and still find love. Anna packed up her sewing supplies. I'll see you tomorrow at the church. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Tomorrow she'd stand in front of the whole town and marry Clayton Mercer. Tomorrow, her life would change forever. She wasn't afraid exactly, but she was aware of the weight of what she was doing, choosing a life that would be hard, that would require fighting for every scrap of acceptance, that would mark her as different forever. But when she thought about Clayton, about his steady presence and quiet strength, about the way he saw her and valued her exactly as she was, the choice seemed simple. She heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see Clayton in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Kept thinking about tomorrow, about everything that could go wrong. Like what? Like the whole town showing up to protest. Like Cartwright causing trouble. Like you changing your mind at the last minute and realizing you deserve better than a broken-down rancher with more past than future. Evelyn stood and crossed to him, taking his hands. Listen to me, Clayton Mercer. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not deserving better. I'm getting exactly what I deserve, which is a good man who loves me, and whatever trouble comes tomorrow, we'll face it together. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. This time tomorrow, you'll be my wife, he said softly. This time tomorrow, you'll be stuck with me for the rest of your life. That's all I want. You, me, and whatever time we're given together. Then let's get married and scandalize the territory. Sounds like a plan. Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect Arizona day that felt like a blessing. Evelyn dressed carefully in her new blue dress, pinned up her hair, and tried to calm her racing heart. Through the window, she could see Clayton in the yard, hitching the wagon. He wore his best suit, black, slightly worn at the elbows, but clean and pressed. He looked handsome and nervous and wonderful. They rode to town in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, charged with anticipation rather than anxiety. As they approached Redemption Creek, Evelyn saw the church, a small white building on the edge of town, its bell tower reaching toward the sky. And around it, people. More people than Evelyn had expected. The whole town had turned out, just as Reverend Walsh had predicted. Some looked curious, some disapproving, but they were all there. Ready? Clayton asked, helping her down from the wagon. As I'll ever be. They walked into the church together, and every head turned. Evelyn felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their speculation, but she kept her head high and her hand tight in Clayton's, and they walked down the aisle to where Reverend Walsh waited. The ceremony was simple and beautiful. Reverend Walsh spoke about love and commitment, about building lives together in hard country, about the courage it took to choose happiness after loss. Then he turned to them.
Clayton Mercer, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. Clayton's voice was steady, his gray eyes never leaving Evelyn's face. Evelyn Ward, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I do. And she meant it with everything in her. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife. Clayton, you may kiss your bride. He did, soft and sweet and full of promise. And when they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, some people were smiling, and that was enough. Outside there was no reception. They hadn't planned one. But as they walked to their wagon, Anna Pritchard pressed a basket into Evelyn's hands. Wedding cake, she whispered. Baked it myself. Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer. Thank you, Anna. They rode home as husband and wife, and Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. That was all that mattered. So, Clayton said as they turned onto the ranch road, how does it feel to be married to the most stubborn man in the territory? Perfect. How does it feel to be married to the most difficult woman? Like coming home. And it was. They were home, together, finally and forever. The ranch house felt different when they returned as husband and wife. Not physically. The same furniture sat in the same places, the same curtains hung in the same windows, but the air itself seemed charged with new meaning. This wasn't just Clayton's house anymore, or a place where Evelyn was staying. This was their home, their shared beginning. Clayton carried her over the threshold despite her protest that it was an old-fashioned custom they didn't need to observe, but he insisted, and when he set her down in the front room, they stood there looking at each other with a mixture of joy and uncertainty. So, Evelyn said finally, we're married. We are. Clayton reached up and loosened his tie. Strange how saying vows in front of people makes it feel more real than when we decided in private. Not strange. That's the point of ceremony. To make private commitments public and binding. She turned slowly, looking at the house with new eyes. This is my home now, legally and officially. It's been your home since you decided to stay. The paper just makes it official. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door, and Evelyn noticed his hands were shaking slightly. He was nervous, she realized, just as nervous as she was about what came next. They'd talked about expectations and taking things slow, but they'd also just promised themselves to each other for life. There was an intimacy to marriage that went beyond the physical, but the physical was still there, waiting to be navigated. I should change out of this dress, Evelyn said. Anna worked too hard on it for me to risk ruining it doing evening chores. I'll start dinner, unless you're not hungry. I'm starving, actually. Turns out getting married works up an appetite. They moved through the evening routines with careful normalcy, changing clothes, preparing dinner, eating at the kitchen table while discussing the ceremony and the people who'd attended. But underneath the ordinary conversation ran a current of awareness, a knowledge that tonight would be different from all the nights before. After dinner, they washed dishes together in comfortable silence. Clayton's arm brushed Evelyn's as he reached for a towel, and she felt heat spread from the point of contact. When had simple touch become so charged? I've been thinking, Clayton said as he dried the last plate, about sleeping arrangements. Oh? Your room is still yours if that's what you want. No pressure, no expectations, but... He set down the plate and turned to face her fully. But I'd like you in my room, our room. Not necessarily we don't have to... He stopped, clearly flustered. I'm making a mess of this. Evelyn smiled and took his hand. You're saying you want me close, but you're not assuming that means we'll consummate the marriage tonight. Exactly. Though when you put it so bluntly, it sounds ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, it's honest. She squeezed his hand. I want to be close to you too. I want to wake up beside you and fall asleep knowing you're there. The rest, we'll figure it out when we're both ready. Relief flooded Clayton's face. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for being patient with me. I know this must be strange for you, having been married before. Everything about us is strange. That's what makes it work. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Shall we go upstairs? They climbed to the second floor, and Clayton led her to the master bedroom, his room, though he'd already started calling it theirs. Evelyn had only glimpsed it briefly before, but now she took in the details. A large bed with a simple quilt, a dresser that had seen better days, a washstand with a porcelain basin. The room was clean but sparse, as if Clayton had stripped away anything that might remind him too much of Sarah. I cleared out half the dresser for your things, Clayton said, gesturing to the empty drawers. And there's space in the wardrobe, though I know you don't have much to move. It's perfect. Evelyn walked to the window and looked out at the moonlit landscape. You can see the whole eastern pasture from here. Sarah used to sit at that window and watch the sunrise, said it was the most beautiful sight in the world. He came to stand beside her. I haven't opened those curtains in 5 years, couldn't bear to look at what she loved and remember she'd never see it again. And now? Now I think maybe it's time to let the light back in. Evelyn turned to him, seeing the vulnerability in his face. This was hard for him. Moving forward, making space for her in rooms that had belonged to another life. But he was trying, and that meant everything. I'll get my things, she said softly. It won't take long. It took 3 trips to move her belongings from the spare room to the master bedroom. Clayton helped, carrying her books and the small trunk that held everything she owned. As they arranged her possessions among his, the room began to look lived in for the first time in years. Evelyn's hairbrush on the dresser beside his razor, her books stacked next to his on the small shelf, her nightgown hanging next to his nightshirt behind the door. It looks right, Clayton said, surveying the room. Having your things here, like they belong. They do belong. I belong. They changed for bed with careful modesty, turning their backs to give each other privacy. When they finally slid between the sheets from opposite sides of the bed, there was a moment of awkwardness as they figured out where to position themselves. Too close seemed presumptuous. Too far seemed like rejection. Evelyn settled it by scooting toward the middle of the bed and resting her head on Clayton's shoulder. His arm came around her naturally, and suddenly the awkwardness dissolved. This is nice, she murmured. It is. His voice rumbled in his chest beneath her ear. I'd forgotten what it was like, not being alone at night. Are you all right? With me here, I mean, in the room you shared with Sarah? I'm all right. More than all right. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You're not replacing her, Evelyn. You're building something new with me. I'm finally starting to understand the difference. They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. An owl hooted in the distance. The wind rattled the shutters gently, their breathing synchronized without conscious effort. Clayton, Evelyn said into the darkness. Thank you for today. For standing up in front of everyone and claiming me as yours. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes. Sleep came easier than either expected, and Evelyn woke to sunlight streaming through the now open curtains and the unfamiliar but wonderful sensation of Clayton's arm still around her waist. He was already awake, watching her with soft eyes. Morning, Mrs. Mercer. Morning, Mr. Mercer, she smiled. That's going to take some getting used to. We have time. The rest of our lives, in fact. The first weeks of married life passed in a blur of work and adjustment. They fell into rhythms that felt natural, working the ranch together during the day, cooking and eating dinner together in the evening, falling asleep wrapped around each other at night. Slowly, the physical intimacy between them deepened. A kiss goodnight became longer, more heated. Hands that had been careful began to explore. One night, 3 weeks after the wedding, Clayton's hand slid beneath Evelyn's nightgown, and she didn't stop him. Instead, she pulled him closer, and they discovered each other with patience and tenderness, an occasional awkward laughter when something didn't work quite right. I love you, Clayton whispered afterward, holding her close in the moonlight. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Me too. But it's a good scared, like standing on the edge of something beautiful and deciding to jump. The town's attitude toward them slowly began to shift. It started small, Mary Harris inviting them to dinner, Tom asking Clayton's advice on breeding stock, Anna stopping by with fresh bread and staying for coffee.
But gradually, more neighbors followed suit. Not everyone, of course. Mrs. Henderson maintained her disapproval with icy silence whenever they encountered each other in town. James Cartwright glared at them with barely concealed hostility. But enough people accepted them that they no longer felt like complete outcasts. The real change came 2 months after the wedding, when Evelyn was helping Anna with her baby and noticed bruises on Anna's wrist. "Anna, what happened?" Anna pulled her sleeve down quickly. "Nothing. I'm just clumsy." "That's not clumsiness. That's a handprint." Evelyn kept her voice gentle but firm. "Did your husband do this?" Anna's eyes filled with tears. "He gets angry sometimes, says I'm not submissive enough, that I've been influenced by your example, that I need to remember my place." "Your place is not under his fist." "What choice do I have? Where would I go? What would I do?" Anna wiped her eyes roughly. "I have a baby, no money, no family nearby. I'm trapped." Evelyn thought fast. "You could come stay with us just for a while until you figure things out. Clayton and I have space, and we could use help with the ranch. You could work for wages, save money, make a plan." "He'd never let me leave." "He doesn't get to let you do anything. You're not his property, Anna. You're a human being with rights and choices." That evening, Evelyn told Clayton about Anna's situation. His face darkened with anger. "I'll talk to Pritchard. Make it clear that hitting his wife isn't acceptable. That might make it worse for Anna. Men like that don't respond well to being challenged. They just take it out on the people they can control." "Then what do you suggest?" "I told Anna she could stay here. Work for wages while she figures out her next step. But I should have asked you first. It's your house, too." "It's our house, and of course she can stay." Clayton stood and paced. "But Pritchard will come looking for her. He'll claim we're harboring his wife, interfering in his marriage. Let him come. We'll tell him the truth, that Anna is working here of her own free will, and he can either accept that or take it up with the territorial marshal." "You're sure about this? It'll cause trouble." "I'm sure. I can't save every woman in an unhappy marriage, but I can help one, especially one who helped us." 2 days later, Anna showed up at their door with her baby and a single bag of belongings. Her lip was split, and fresh bruises decorated her face. "He found out I was talking about leaving," she said quietly. "Said he'd teach me to keep my mouth shut. So I waited until he passed out drunk, and I walked here." Clayton and Evelyn took her in without hesitation. They set her up in the spare room, helped her settle the baby, and made it clear she was welcome for as long as she needed. Pritchard came the next morning, exactly as predicted. He rode up to the house in a rage, demanding his wife be returned to him immediately. "Anna is staying here," Clayton said calmly, standing on his porch with his rifle cradled in his arms. "Of her own choice. If you want to speak to her, you can do so respectfully, and she can decide whether to listen." "She's my wife. You got no right." "She's a human being who's been beaten. I've got every right to offer shelter to someone in need." Clayton's voice hardened. "Now, you can leave peacefully, or I can ride into town and bring Marshal Hayes back here to see those bruises on Anna's face. Your choice." Pritchard sputtered with rage but eventually left, shouting threats over his shoulder. They didn't see him again for a week. Anna flourished at the ranch. She helped with cooking and mending, played with her baby in the yard, and slowly began to smile again. She and Evelyn worked side by side, and Anna started talking about her dreams, really talking, not just wishing. "I want to open a dress shop," she said one afternoon as they hung laundry. "I'm good with a needle, and I love designing things, but I'd need capital, a location, customers who'd take me seriously. Then start small, make dresses for the women around here, build a reputation, save money. It'll take time, but it's possible." "You really think so?" "I know so. Look at us. We're running this ranch together as equals. 6 months ago, people said that was impossible. But here we are, proving them wrong every day." The situation with Pritchard came to a head 3 weeks after Anna arrived. He showed up drunk one night, pounding on the door and demanding his wife. Clayton met him in the yard with his rifle, and Pritchard pulled a gun. "You can't keep her from me. She's mine." "She's not property, and you need to leave before this gets ugly." "It's already ugly. You and your whore of a wife, corrupting decent women, destroying marriages." He didn't get to finish.
Clayton moved faster than Evelyn had ever seen, knocking the gun from Pritchard's hand and putting him flat on his back in the dirt. "Listen to me very carefully," Clayton said, his voice deadly quiet. "You will never speak about my wife that way again. You will never come to my property again.
And you will leave Anna alone, or I will make sure every person in this territory knows what kind of man you are. Am I clear?" Pritchard scrambled to his feet and ran for his horse, leaving his gun in the dirt. They didn't see him again. Word spread fast about the confrontation. Some people criticized Clayton for interfering in another man's marriage. But more people, especially women, quietly showed their support. Mary Harris came by with a basket of vegetables. Other women stopped Evelyn in town to thank her for helping Anna. The balance was shifting, slowly but surely. 3 months after Anna arrived, she asked Evelyn and Clayton for help with something important. "I want to file for divorce," she said. "I know it's scandalous and people will talk, but I can't go back to him, not after everything." "Then we'll help you," Evelyn said immediately. "Whatever you need." They rode together to see the territorial judge, a fair-minded man named Carson, who listened to Anna's story and looked at the fading bruises with grim sympathy. "Divorce is rare out here," he said, "but in cases of abuse, I'm willing to grant it. However, Mrs. Pritchard, you need to understand that you'll be giving up any claim to your husband's property. You'll leave the marriage with nothing but what you brought to it. I don't want his property. I want my freedom. Then I'll draw up the papers. It'll take a few weeks to finalize." 6 months after Evelyn and Clayton's wedding, Anna's divorce was granted. She stayed on at the ranch, working and saving money. And she started taking dress orders from women in town, her reputation as a seamstress growing with each satisfied customer. "I think I can do it," she told Evelyn one evening. "Open my shop. I've saved enough for rent on a small building in town, and I've got orders lined up for months." "Then do it. You've earned this." Anna opened her dress shop in the spring, and it became an instant success. Women from all over the territory came to her for dresses, alterations, and advice. She hired 2 other women to help her, women who needed work and a place where they'd be valued. "None of this would have happened without you," Anna said to Evelyn at the shop's grand opening. "You showed me it was possible to choose yourself, to be brave. You showed yourself that. I just gave you a place to land while you figured it out." The ranch prospered through that first year of marriage. Clayton and Evelyn worked as true partners, each bringing different strengths to the operation. They expanded the herd, improved the pastures, and built a reputation for quality cattle. More importantly, they built a life together, one filled with hard work, honest conversation, and deep love. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Evelyn realized she'd missed her monthly bleeding. She'd been feeling tired lately, slightly nauseous in the mornings. She knew what it meant, but she was afraid to hope. "Clayton," she said carefully, "I think I might be pregnant." He went very still. "You think?" "I'm fairly certain. All the signs are there." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you all right?" he whispered. "Are you scared?" "Yes, but I'm also happy. Are you?" "I'm terrified," he admitted. "After what happened with Sarah, I don't know if I can go through that again." "You won't have to go through it alone this time. We'll do this together. And whatever happens, we'll face it together." He pulled back enough to cup her face in his hands. "A baby. Our baby." "Our baby," she confirmed, smiling through tears. They rode to see the doctor the next week, and he confirmed what Evelyn already knew. She was about 3 months along, healthy and strong. The baby was due in early spring. "You'll need to take it easy," the doctor cautioned. "No heavy lifting, plenty of rest." "I have a ranch to run," Evelyn protested. "Then get help. Your husband can handle the heavy work, and you can do the lighter tasks. But Mrs. Mercer, pregnancy is hard on the body. You need to be careful." Clayton hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men from town who needed employment. Evelyn chafed at the restrictions but obeyed them, knowing the baby's health was more important than her pride. As her belly grew, so did the community's acceptance of them. Women who'd been cold before softened when they saw Evelyn pregnant. There was something about a woman carrying new life that transcended scandal and gossip. Even Mrs. Henderson unbent enough to nod to Evelyn in church. But James Cartwright's hostility never wavered. If anything, it intensified as he watched the Mercers' success. He made several more offers to buy Clayton's land, each more aggressive than the last. When Clayton refused, strange things began happening again. Fences cut, cattle spooked, equipment damaged. "It's him," Clayton said grimly after finding poison in one of the water troughs. "Has to be. He's trying to drive us out." "Then we go to Marshal Hayes, make an official complaint." They rode into town and filed charges. Marshal Hayes listened carefully and promised to investigate. 2 days later, he showed up at Cartwright's ranch with deputies and a search warrant. In Cartwright's barn, they found wire cutters that matched the fence damage, along with other incriminating evidence. "You're under arrest, Cartwright," Marshal Hayes said, "for vandalism, trespassing, and attempted harm to livestock." Cartwright's trial was the talk of the territory. He claimed innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in territorial prison and ordered him to sell his ranch to pay restitution to the Mercers and other ranchers he'd harmed. With Cartwright gone, peace finally settled over the territory. The Mercers could work their ranch without fear, could plan for the future without looking over their shoulders. Winter came, and Evelyn grew larger with each passing day. Clayton fussed over her constantly, making sure she was warm enough, fed enough, rested enough. She tolerated his hovering because she understood the fear behind it, the memory of Sarah dying in childbirth, of a baby boy who'd lived only 3 hours. "I'm strong," she reminded him one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "And I'm healthy. The doctor says everything is progressing normally." "I know, but I can't help worrying." "Then worry with me, not at me. Let me share the burden." "I'm trying. But Evelyn, if something happened to you—" His voice broke. "I couldn't survive it." "You could. You survived losing Sarah. You're stronger than you think." "I was only existing, not surviving. You're the one who taught me the difference." The baby kicked beneath Clayton's hand, and he laughed through his tears. "Strong little thing. Takes after her mother." "You think it's a girl?" "I hope so. The world needs more strong women." In February, on a clear, cold morning, Evelyn's pains began. They started slow and built gradually, giving Clayton time to ride for the doctor and the midwife. Both arrived within hours, and they set up in the bedroom while Clayton paced downstairs, going quietly mad with worry. Mary Harris showed up to help, having heard the news in town. Anna came too, taking charge of the house and keeping Clayton from wearing a hole in the floor. "She's strong," Anna told him. "She'll get through this." Sarah was strong too, didn't help her. Sarah was strong, but she was alone. Evelyn has all of us, and she has you. That makes all the difference. The labor lasted through the day and into the night. Clayton could hear Evelyn crying out, and each sound felt like a knife to his heart. But between the cries, he heard her talking, heard her joke with the midwife, heard her tell the doctor she was fine, and to stop hovering. That was his Evelyn, strong even in pain. Near dawn, the cries changed. The baby's first wail split the morning air, and Clayton nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling broadly. "Mr. Mercer, you have a healthy baby girl, and your wife is doing fine, tired but fine." He took the stairs 3 at a time. In the bedroom, Evelyn lay propped against pillows, sweaty and exhausted and more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. In her arms, wrapped in a clean blanket, was the tiniest person Clayton had ever seen. "Come meet your daughter," Evelyn said softly. Clayton approached on shaking legs. The baby was perfect, dark hair like Evelyn's, a rosebud mouth, tiny fingers that gripped his thumb when he offered it. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "like her mother. We made her, you and me together. What should we name her?" Evelyn looked down at their daughter, then back at Clayton. "I was thinking, Hope. Hope Mercer, because she represents everything we hoped for when we were both so alone." "Hope," Clayton repeated, tasting the name. "It's perfect." He sat on the edge of the bed, and Evelyn shifted so he could hold his daughter. Hope opened her eyes, bright blue, though the doctor said they'd likely change, and looked at her father with solemn consideration.
Hello, Hope, Clayton said, tears streaming down his face. Welcome to the world. We're so happy you're here. Over the next weeks, the ranch transformed into a center of activity. Women from all over the territory stopped by with gifts and advice.
Anna became a regular visitor, cooing over Hope and helping with whatever needed doing. Even Mrs. Henderson unbent enough to bring a hand-knitted blanket, though she left quickly afterward without saying much. Clayton was a devoted father, getting up for middle-of-the-night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking Hope around the house when she was fussy. Evelyn watched him with their daughter and felt her heart overflow with love. "You're a natural," she told him one evening as he rocked Hope to sleep. "I'm terrified I'll break her. She's so small." "She's tougher than she looks. Like her parents." "Like her mother, you mean?" "Like both of us. We've built something good here, Clayton, something that matters." As Hope grew from newborn to infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Clayton and Evelyn worked together seamlessly, balancing parenthood with the demands of running a successful cattle operation. They hired more help, expanded their holdings, and became respected members of the community. But Evelyn never forgot her dream of teaching. When Hope turned 2, Evelyn approached the territorial school board with a proposal. She would teach the children of neighboring ranches in a small schoolhouse on Mercer land. The board, desperate for qualified teachers, agreed. Clayton and the ranch hands built a one-room schoolhouse that fall. 8 children showed up the first day, including Anna's daughter from a new, happier marriage. By winter, enrollment had grown to 15. Evelyn loved teaching. She loved watching children's faces light up when they understood something new, loved fostering curiosity instead of crushing it, loved being the teacher she'd never had, one who welcomed questions and celebrated different ways of thinking. One afternoon, as Clayton picked Hope up from school, he stood in the doorway watching Evelyn work with her students. She was explaining fractions using pieces of pie, and the children were engaged and laughing and learning. This was what she'd been meant to do all along. Not hide her intelligence to make others comfortable, but share it with those who needed it most. "Your wife's something special," Tom Harris said, picking up his own son. "My boy couldn't read a word 6 months ago. Now he's reading everything he can get his hands on." "She is special," Clayton agreed, pride warming his voice. "Always has been." On their 5th anniversary, Clayton and Evelyn sat on the porch as the sun set, watching Hope play in the yard with the ranch dogs. The rose bushes Sarah had planted had been revived and were blooming again, along with new flowers Evelyn had added. The ranch was thriving, the school was successful, and their family was happy. "Do you ever think about that broken wheel?" Evelyn asked, leaning against Clayton's shoulder. "How different everything would be if you'd ridden past that night." "I think about it sometimes. Wonder what would have happened to both of us if we'd never met. I'd probably be living with my cousin, working myself to exhaustion on a homestead that wasn't really mine. And I'd still be alone in this house, existing but not really living." He pulled her closer. "But we did meet, and look what we built. A life. A real life, not just survival. A family, a home, a future." Clayton tilted her face up and kissed her softly. "Forever, like I promised. Forever like we both promised." Hope ran up to the porch, her dark hair wild and her face flushed with play. "Mama, can we read the story about the princess who saved herself?" "Of course, sweetheart. Go wash up, and we'll read before bed." As Hope ran inside, Evelyn looked at Clayton and smiled. "We did good, didn't we? We did better than good. We built exactly the life you said you wanted, a life where you could be yourself without apology. A life where both of us could be ourselves, where we could love and be loved exactly as we are." The sun set in brilliant shades of orange and purple, painting the Arizona sky in colors that never got old. Inside, Hope was calling for her parents, ready for stories and bedtime rituals. The cattle were settled for the night. The school was ready for tomorrow's lessons. Everything was as it should be. They'd been 2 broken people once, both convinced they'd die alone. But a cowboy had refused to ride past a woman in need, and everything had changed. They'd fought prejudice and gossip and violence. They'd stood together when the world tried to pull them apart. They'd built a partnership based on respect and equality and deep, abiding love. And now, 5 years later, they had everything that mattered: each other, their daughter, their home, their community, and a future stretching out before them filled with possibility. "Come on," Evelyn said, standing and offering Clayton her hand. "Our daughter's waiting for her story. Which one are we reading tonight?" "The one about the cowboy who saved the lonely woman." "I thought you saved yourself." "We saved each other. That's how the best stories go." They walked inside together, hand in hand, to read their daughter a story about love and courage and choosing happiness even when the world said it was impossible. And as they tucked Hope into bed and kissed her goodnight, as they climbed the stairs to their own room and fell asleep wrapped around each other the way they had every night for 5 years, they knew they'd made the right choice. Forever had started with a broken wheel and a cowboy who refused to ride past. But it would continue through all the years ahead, built on promises kept and love freely given. They'd been told they'd be alone forever, but they'd proved everyone wrong. Forever started with them. Together. And that made all the difference.